Hello guys, welcome to Harry FLAX. So in this video, we will see what if Professor X found Harry at age 7 and discovered Dumbledore's 33 mental manipulation spells through Cerebro. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. Discovery. The portable Cerebro unit hummed with a soft blue glow as Charles Xavier adjusted the neural interface. Rain pattered against the windows of his modest London hotel suite, a steady rhythm that helped him focus as he prepared for another scanning session. "Let's see what we find today," he murmured to himself, settling the sleek metal helmet over his bald head. The portable unit wasn't nearly as powerful as the chamber back at the mansion, but it served its purpose for these international scouting trips. Mutant signatures had been appearing with increasing frequency in the UK, and several had displayed unusual patterns that warranted personal investigation. Xavier closed his eyes and let his consciousness expand outward. The familiar sensation washed over him, millions of minds lighting up like stars in a vast mental cosmos. Human minds glowed with a steady, ordinary light, while mutant signatures burned brighter, each with its distinct color and intensity. Something unusual tugged at his awareness, a signature unlike any he'd encountered before. Not quite mutant, yet far from ordinary. The mental pattern pulsed with potential power, but it was constrained. Artificially dampened and redirected. What on earth? Xavier focused his attention, directing the Cerebro amplification toward the anomaly. The signature belonged to a child, somewhere in Surrey. But as Xavier attempted to get clearer coordinates, he encountered something that made him physically recoil. The child's mind was wrapped in layers of sophisticated psychic manipulation, not random or accidental, but deliberate, structured impositions. Xavier removed the helmet, a deep frown creasing his forehead. He reached for the secure phone beside the Cerebro unit. "Ororo. It's Charles. I need you and Jean to join me in London immediately. I found something concerning." The next morning, Xavier sat in the passenger seat of a rented sedan as Storm navigated the suburban streets of Little Whinging. The neighborhood was almost painfully ordinary, identical houses with identical gardens lining immaculate streets. "Are you certain about this, Charles?" Storm asked, her white hair tucked under a stylish scarf to attract less attention. "This doesn't seem like the sort of place we'd find anything unusual." "That's precisely what concerns me," Xavier replied, gesturing toward a house with a brass number 4 on its door. "This is it. Privet Drive." Jean Grey leaned forward from the back seat. "I can feel it too now. There's something off about the psychic atmosphere around this house." They parked across the street, observing as a horse-faced woman peered suspiciously through her curtains at them. "How do you want to approach this?" Storm asked. Xavier's fingers tapped thoughtfully against his wheelchair's armrest. "Directly, I think. The signature belongs to a child, and those manipulations I sensed. I'm deeply troubled by their nature and complexity." As they prepared to exit the vehicle, a massive man with a walrus mustache emerged from the house, followed by a pudgy boy who appeared to be around 7 or 8 years old. The man cast a suspicious glance at their car before ushering the boy into an expensive-looking sedan. "The child's cousin, perhaps," Xavier murmured. "But not our young friend. He's still inside." They waited until the car drove away before approaching the house. Storm helped Xavier navigate his wheelchair up the short garden path while Jean rang the doorbell. After several moments, the thin woman they'd seen earlier opened the door, her eyes narrowing at the sight of them. "We're not interested in whatever you're selling," she said curtly, already beginning to close the door. Xavier smiled pleasantly. "Mrs. Petunia Desley? We're not salespeople. My name is Professor Charles Xavier. I run a school for gifted youngsters, and I believe there's a child in your care who might benefit from our program." Petunia's face drained of color. "I don't know what you're talking about. There's only my Dutters, and he's out with his father." Jean and Xavier exchanged a quick glance, both sensing the woman's sudden spike of anxiety. "I think you know exactly who we're referring to, Mrs. Dursley," Xavier said, his voice remaining gentle despite the steel beneath his words. "May we come in? I promise we mean no harm." You're one of them, aren't you?" Petunia hissed, glancing nervously at the neighboring houses. "Those freaks?" Xavier raised an eyebrow. "I assure you, Mrs. Dursley, we are simply educators concerned about a child. Now, shall we continue this conversation inside, or would you prefer to discuss your nephew's situation here on your doorstep where all your neighbors can hear?" That did it. With a resentful glare, Petunia stepped back, allowing them to enter the obsessively clean house. "He's not here," she said, arms crossed defensively once they were inside. "And I don't know how you found out about him, but we were told no one would bother us." "He promised." "Who promised, Mrs. Dursley?" Storm asked. "That Dumbledore man," Petunia spat. "When he left the boy here. Said we'd be safe if we took him in. Didn't mention people in wheelchairs showing up asking questions." Xavier's expression remained calm, but Jean could sense his growing concern. "And where is your nephew now, if I might ask?" Petunia's eyes darted toward the hallway. "Doing his chores, where he belongs." Xavier didn't need to read her mind to follow her gaze to a small door beneath the stairs, a cupboard. He exchanged a troubled look with Storm and Jean. "Mrs. Dursley," he said carefully, "I'd very much like to meet the young man." Before Petunia could object further, they heard the sound of a vacuum cleaner starting up in the living room. Xavier wheeled himself toward the sound, finding a small, painfully thin boy with unruly black hair and broken glasses held together with tape. The child was struggling to maneuver a vacuum cleaner nearly as big as himself. The boy looked up, startled by their appearance. For a moment, everyone stood frozen, the boy's emerald green eyes widening behind his glasses. "Hello," Xavier said softly. "You must be Harry." The vacuum cleaner shut off automatically as the boy's finger slipped from the switch. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry for the noise. I'll be done quickly." "He needs to finish his chores," Petunia said sharply from behind them. "The boy has responsibilities." Storm's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint appearing in them that made Petunia take an involuntary step backward. "Responsibilities? He can't be more than 7 years old." 7 and 3 months, Harry said quietly, eyes fixed on the floor. Xavier wheeled closer to the boy, keeping his movements slow and unthreatening. "Harry, my name is Professor Charles Xavier. These are my colleagues, Aurora Monroe and Jean Grey. We've come to talk to you." Harry's eyes widened further, darting between the 3 strangers and his aunt. "To me? But why?" "Because you're special, Harry," Jean said, kneeling down to his eye level. "And we'd like to help you." Harry shook his head rapidly. "I'm not special. I'm just Harry. Just Harry." Xavier caught the strange inflection in the boy's voice, almost as if he were reciting something he'd been taught to say. "Would you mind if I asked you a few questions, Harry?" Petunia stepped forward. "Now see here, perhaps," Xavier cut in smoothly, "Dr. Grey could help you prepare some tea while Ms. Monroe assists with any household tasks that need completing. It would give Harry and me a chance to chat." It wasn't a suggestion, and Petunia seemed to realize it. With a tight nod, she led Jean toward the kitchen, throwing worried glances over her shoulder. Once they were alone, Xavier smiled warmly at Harry. "You can relax, Harry. You're not in any trouble." Harry didn't seem convinced, his small body remaining tense as if ready to bolt. "Are you from the school? Aunt Petunia said they'd be calling about the broken window, but it wasn't my fault, I swear. Dudley was chasing me and I just ended up on the roof somehow." Xavier's interest piqued. "You found yourself on a roof? How fascinating. Can you tell me more about that?" Harry's eyes widened in alarm. I don't know how it happened." I'm not a freak. I'm normal. Again, that strange recitation quality to his words. Xavier made a gentle shushing sound. I don't think you're a freak at all, Harry. In fact, I think you're quite extraordinary. Would you like to see something interesting? Curiosity fought with caution on the boy's face. Slowly, he nodded. Xavier raised his hand, and the small decorative vase on the side table floated gently into the air. Harry gasped, his green eyes enormous behind his broken glasses. You can do it too, he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Not quite the same way you can, Xavier replied, setting the vase down. But yes, I have special abilities. And so do my friends. We work with children who have gifts, to help them understand and control them. Harry seemed to deflate. But Uncle Vernon says I can't leave. He says they're stuck with me. I see. Xavier studied the small boy more carefully. The oversized clothes hanging off his thin frame, the faded bruise just visible at his wrist, the way he seemed to make himself smaller, less noticeable. Harry, would you mind if I tried something? I promise it won't hurt. Harry hesitated, then nodded cautiously. I'd like to speak to you without using my voice, Xavier explained. It's something I can do with my mind. May I try? Harry's eyes went wide again, but curiosity won out. He nodded. Xavier raised 2 fingers to his temple, focusing gently. Hello, Harry. Can you hear me? The boy jumped slightly, then broke into the first genuine smile Xavier had seen from him. Yes. How are you doing that? But as Xavier's mind made contact with Harry's, he encountered something that made his blood run cold. The boy's mind was encased in layer upon layer of sophisticated psychic manipulations, compulsions, memory blocks, behavioral modifications, emotional dampeners. Xavier had seen mental tampering before, but nothing so comprehensive, so meticulously constructed. Someone had essentially programmed this child's mind like a computer, setting parameters for his thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. With growing horror, Xavier began to carefully catalog the manipulations, taking care not to disturb them yet. He counted 7 affecting self-perception, 8 controlling relationships, 10 suppressing or redirecting abilities, and 8 more shaping future decisions. 33 distinct spells, all woven together with frightening sophistication. Professor? Harry's spoken voice broke through Xavier's concentration. Are you okay? You look upset. Xavier forced a reassuring smile. I'm fine, Harry. But I've discovered something important. Your mind is very special, but someone has put some barriers in place that are preventing you from being entirely yourself. Harry frowned. Like, magic? Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon say there's no such thing as magic. And yet you found yourself on a roof, Xavier pointed out gently. What would you call that? Harry bit his lip, clearly struggling with this contradiction. They'd be really angry if I said it was magic. Would it be alright if I tried to remove one of these barriers? Xavier asked. Just a small one, to show you what I mean. It might feel a bit strange, but it won't hurt. After a moment's hesitation, Harry nodded. Xavier focused on the simplest of the manipulations he could identify, a spell suppressing Harry's confidence and sense of self-worth. With delicate psychic precision, he created a temporary neutralizing field around it, not removing it completely yet but suspending its effects. The change in Harry was immediate and striking. His posture straightened slightly, his eyes became more focused, and a slight flush of healthy color appeared in his pale cheeks. I feel different, Harry said, sounding surprised. Lighter, somehow. That's because I've temporarily suspended a spell that was making you feel bad about yourself, Xavier explained. Someone put it there deliberately, Harry. Along with many others. Harry's brow furrowed. But who would do that? And why? That's what I intend to find out, Xavier promised. But first, I need to ask you something important, Harry. Are you happy here, with your aunt and uncle? Harry looked down at his oversized shoes. With the confidence suppression temporarily lifted, he answered more honestly than he might have before. No, sir. They don't like me much. I sleep in the cupboard under the stairs, and sometimes they don't let me eat if I do something wrong. Xavier felt a surge of anger that he carefully contained. I see. And would you be willing to come with us, just for a little while? I have colleagues who might be able to help remove those barriers in your mind, to let you be truly yourself. Hope flickered across Harry's face, quickly followed by doubt. But Uncle Vernon says no one wants me. That's why I have to stay here. I can assure you, Harry, that is entirely untrue, Xavier said firmly. In fact, the sudden shattering of glass from the kitchen interrupted him. Jean's voice called out, Charles. We have company, magical signatures approaching fast. Xavier reached out with his mind and detected several new presences converging on the house, minds with a distinct energy pattern unlike anything mutant or human. It seemed their visit had triggered some kind of magical alarm system. Storm rushed into the room. Charles, we need to leave. Now. Xavier turned to Harry, who looked frightened by the sudden commotion. Harry, I promise we'll explain everything, but right now, we need to go. Will you come with us? Harry glanced toward the kitchen where his aunt was speaking in harsh, panicked whispers to Jean. He looked back at Xavier, searching the man's face. You'll help me fix what's in my head. The things that don't belong there. I give you my word, Xavier promised. Harry took a deep breath, squared his small shoulders, and nodded. Jean hurried in, keeping her voice low. His aunt says they're called Aurors, some kind of magical law enforcement. Apparently, there are protective wards around this house that alert someone called Dumbledore if Harry leaves or if certain kinds of magic are detected inside. Dumbledore? Harry repeated. I know that name. I think. Xavier nodded. The architect of the manipulations in your mind, I suspect. Storm, get the car ready. Jean, help Harry gather anything he wants to take. Harry shook his head. I don't have anything worth taking, sir. The simple statement, delivered without self-pity, just reinforced Xavier's determination to help this child. Very well. Let's go. As Storm helped Xavier toward the door, Petunia appeared from the kitchen, her face contorted with fear and anger. You can't take him. They'll know. They'll come after us. Xavier fixed her with a stern gaze. Perhaps you should have considered that before keeping a child in a cupboard, Mrs. Dursley. Rest assured, I'll handle any complications with these. Horrors. Outside, the sunny suburban street had darkened as clouds gathered overhead, a reflection of Storm's agitation. They hurried to the car, Xavier telepathically scanning the area and detecting at least 5 magical signatures approaching from different directions. They're surrounding us, he warned as Storm helped him into the passenger seat while Jean guided Harry into the back. I'll handle it, Storm said, her eyes turning white as she called upon her powers. The gathering clouds erupted into a localized deluge, creating a wall of rain around their immediate vicinity that reduced visibility to near zero. Jean started the car just as several loud cracks announced the arrival of robed figures appearing out of thin air at the end of the street. Hold on, she warned, throwing the car into reverse and executing a perfect J-turn that sent them speeding in the opposite direction. Harry gripped the door handle, eyes wide with equal parts terror and exhilaration. Who are those people? What's happening? Those are the magical authorities I mentioned, Xavier explained calmly despite their hasty retreat. They've been alerted to our presence, likely because I tampered with one of the spells on your mind. A bolt of red light shot past the car, narrowly missing the side mirror. They're shooting at us. Harry cried. Not for long, Storm muttered, her eyes glowing white again as she concentrated. A thick fog rolled in behind them, obscuring them from their pursuers. That should buy us some time, but they might be able to track him magically. I anticipated that possibility, Xavier said, reaching into his jacket pocket and withdrawing a small silver device. This is an experimental psychic dampener Forge developed. It should mask Harry's signature temporarily. He handed it to Harry. Put this in your pocket, please. Harry took the small device, turning it over in his hands before slipping it into the pocket of his oversized jeans. Where are we going? Somewhere safe, Xavier assured him. Somewhere we can properly examine those manipulations and begin removing them safely. But first, we need to shake off our pursuit. As they sped through the suburban streets, Jean navigating with telepathically enhanced awareness of their pursuers' locations, Xavier turned to look at Harry. The boy was staring out the window, watching the only home he could remember receding in the distance. Having second thoughts? Xavier asked gently. Harry turned to him, and for a moment, Xavier caught a glimpse of something extraordinary in those green eyes, a determination and courage far beyond the boy's 7 years. No, Harry said firmly. I want to know who I really am. Without anyone else deciding for me. They switched vehicles twice over the next few hours, moving from the sedan to a taxi and finally to a nondescript van that Beast had arranged through local contacts. By nightfall, they had reached a remote cottage on the outskirts of the Yorkshire Dales, a safe house the X-Men maintained for European operations. Harry had fallen asleep during the last leg of the journey, emotionally and physically exhausted. Jean carefully carried the sleeping child inside, struck by how little he weighed. He's severely undernourished, she reported quietly after settling Harry in one of the bedrooms. And I found evidence of multiple healed fractures when I scanned him, old injuries that never received proper treatment. Xavier's expression darkened. The physical neglect is disturbing enough, but it pales in comparison to the mental manipulations. I've never seen anything like it, Jean. The intricacy, the sheer number of compulsions. Tell me what you found, Jean said, sitting across from him at the cottage's small kitchen table while Storm secured the perimeter. Xavier pressed his fingertips together, organizing his thoughts. 33 distinct manipulative constructs, all interwoven and supporting each other. Some are straightforward, suppressing certain abilities, enhancing others. Others are more insidious, creating artificial emotional attachments to people he hasn't even met yet, instilling aversions to entire groups of people. Jean looked horrified. Who would do that to a child? Someone with a very specific plan for Harry's future, Xavier replied grimly. The most troubling aspect is that many of these manipulations seem designed to guide Harry toward self-sacrifice, essentially grooming him to be willing to die for whatever cause this Dumbledore deems worthy. Storm entered, shaking raindrops from her white hair. The perimeter is secure, and I've created weather patterns that should discourage aerial surveillance. How is our young friend? Sleeping, Jean said. But Charles was just explaining the extent of the mental manipulation. It's worse than we thought. Can you remove them? Storm asked, joining them at the table. Xavier sighed. Not all at once. They're too interlinked, removing one improperly could destabilize others, potentially causing psychological damage. We need to proceed carefully, map the entire structure. What about Cerebro? The full version back at the mansion? Jean suggested. Eventually, yes, Xavier agreed. But we need to understand what we're dealing with first. I've only seen the surface layer of these manipulations. There could be deeper triggers and failsafes. Storm looked troubled. And what of these magical authorities? If they can track him. The psychic dampener should mask him for now, Xavier said. But we'll need a more permanent solution if we're to help him fully. He paused, expression thoughtful. We may need magical expertise of our own. Jean raised an eyebrow. Do we know anyone with that kind of knowledge? Perhaps, Xavier said cryptically. I've encountered individuals with abilities that could be classified as magical over the years. Different from mutant powers, but perhaps related. I'll make some inquiries. A small sound from the doorway made them all turn. Harry stood there in his oversized clothes, hair sticking up at odd angles, watching them with wary eyes. "I thought you might have left," he said quietly. "We wouldn't do that, Harry," Storm assured him with a warm smile. "Are you hungry?" "I was about to prepare something." Harry nodded hesitantly. "I could cook something. I'm good at cooking. Aunt Petunia taught me." The three adults exchanged troubled glances at this further evidence of the Dursleys' exploitation. "That won't be necessary," Xavier said gently. "You're our guest, Harry. Please, join us." As Harry cautiously took a seat at the table, Xavier observed him carefully. Even with just one manipulation temporarily neutralized, the boy seemed subtly different, slightly more confident, more willing to make eye contact. "Harry, tomorrow I'd like to begin helping you with those barriers we discussed," Xavier explained as Storm set about preparing a simple meal. "Jean is an expert in telepathy as well, even more skilled than I am in some ways. Between us, we should be able to map out all the manipulations affecting you." Harry nodded slowly. "Will it hurt? Taking them out?" "It shouldn't," Jean assured him, "but it might feel strange as you begin experiencing emotions and thoughts more authentically. Things you've been made to feel might suddenly seem less important, while other feelings might become stronger. Like when you did the first one," Harry reasoned. "I suddenly felt. I don't know, like I mattered. Like I was worth something." The simple observation broke something in Xavier's heart. "That's exactly right, Harry. Someone made you feel worthless, and that was terribly wrong." Harry frowned, processing this. "But why? Why would someone do all this to me?" "That's what we intend to find out," Xavier promised. "But first, let's focus on helping you." As they ate the simple meal Storm prepared, Harry gradually relaxed, even asking tentative questions about their abilities. Xavier explained about mutants in basic terms, demonstrating his telepathy again in ways that made Harry smile with wonder. Jean levitated several pieces of silverware in a dancing pattern that delighted the boy, while Storm created a tiny raincloud above an empty glass, filling it with water that made Harry laugh in astonishment. "Can I do things like that?" Harry asked eagerly. "Your abilities seem different from ours," Xavier explained carefully. "What we call mutant abilities come from genetic variations, they're part of who we are physically. Your abilities seem tied to a different energy source that these magical people call, well, magic. But I made that glass disappear once," Harry said thoughtfully. "And I ended up on the school roof when Dudley was chasing me. And one time, my hair grew back overnight after Aunt Petunia cut it all off." "Those sound like instances of accidental magic," a new voice said from the cottage doorway. Everyone turned, startled. A tall woman with long dark hair streaked with silver stood there, wearing an elegant cloak over modern clothes. Her eyes were sharp and knowing. Storm was immediately on her feet, hands crackling with electricity. "Who are you? How did you find this place?" The woman raised her hands in a peaceful gesture. "My name is Andromeda Tonks. And as for how I found you..." She looked directly at Xavier. "You called for magical expertise, did you not, Charles?" Xavier's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Andromeda. It's been quite some time. I didn't expect such a prompt response to my inquiry. When one receives a telepathic message about a magically manipulated child, one tends to respond quickly," she replied dryly. Her gaze fell on Harry, and her composed expression faltered for a moment. "Merlin's beard. That's Harry Potter." Harry shrunk back slightly. "You know who I am?" Andromeda's expression softened. "Everyone in our world knows who you are, child. Though I must say, finding you here, with Charles Xavier of all people." She turned to Xavier with a questioning look. "I assume there's a good explanation for this?" Xavier gestured to an empty chair. "Please, join us. We have much to discuss." As Andromeda settled at the table, Harry watched her cautiously. "Are you going to take me back to the Dursleys?" Absolutely not, she replied firmly. Especially not if what I suspect about your situation is true. She looked to Xavier. You mentioned manipulations. Xavier nodded gravely. 33 distinct spells affecting Harry's mind, personality, abilities, and future choices. I've only temporarily neutralized one, fearing that removing them improperly could cause harm. Andromeda's face drained of color. 33. That's unprecedented. And illegal under wizarding law. Who would? She stopped, her expression hardening. Dumbledore. It has to be. That's the name Harry's aunt mentioned, Jean confirmed. Albus Dumbledore is the most powerful wizard of our age, Andromeda explained, her voice tight with controlled anger. He's also the man who placed Harry with those Muggle relatives after his parents were killed. Killed? Harry's voice was barely audible. Aunt Petunia said they died in a car crash. A flash of fury crossed Andromeda's face. A car crash? They told you your parents died in a car crash. She took a deep breath, visibly calming herself. No, Harry. Your parents, Lily and James Potter, were murdered by a dark wizard called Voldemort when you were just a year old. Somehow, and nobody really understands how, you survived the killing curse he cast at you. That's where that scar on your forehead comes from. And that's why you're famous in our world. You're the boy who lived. Harry's small hand rose unconsciously to touch the lightning-shaped scar. I survived. But they didn't. I'm so sorry, Harry, Andromeda said gently. Xavier observed the conflict of emotions on Harry's face, grief for parents he couldn't remember, confusion about his apparent fame, and a growing anger at having been lied to for so long. So Dumbledore put me with the Dursleys, Harry said slowly. And he also put those spells in my head. It appears so, Xavier confirmed. And that raises serious questions about his intentions for your future. Andromeda looked thoughtful. There was a prophecy about Harry and Voldemort. Very few know the details, but Dumbledore was one of them. If he's manipulating Harry to this extent, then he's shaping him for some predetermined role in fulfilling that prophecy, Xavier finished. Regardless of Harry's own wishes. Which is completely unacceptable, Storm added firmly. I agree, Andromeda said. But you should understand what you're up against. Albus Dumbledore isn't just powerful magically, he holds significant political influence as well. He's the headmaster of Hogwarts School, the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, our High Court, and the supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. Impressive titles, Xavier noted, but they don't give him the right to mentally program a child. No, they don't, Andromeda agreed. But they do make opposing him extremely difficult. She turned to Harry. May I cast a diagnostic spell, Harry? It won't remove anything, just help me see what's been done to you. Harry looked to Xavier, who nodded reassuringly. It's all right, Harry. Andromeda is a friend. After a moment's hesitation, Harry nodded. Andromeda drew a polished wooden wand from her sleeve and murmured an incantation, moving it in a complex pattern over Harry's head. Golden symbols appeared in the air above him, swirling and connecting in intricate patterns. Andromeda's professional composure cracked as she interpreted the results. This is monstrous, she whispered. Some of these compulsions are bound directly to his magical core. Others are triggered to activate at specific ages or when he encounters certain people. She looked at Xavier. You were right to be cautious. Removing these improperly could have catastrophic effects on his mind and magic. But they can be removed? Jean asked. Yes, but carefully. Methodically. Andromeda's expression became resolute. I can help. I was a healer before I married Ted and left Pure Blood Society behind. I specialized in mental magic. Xavier smiled. That's precisely why I reached out to you, Andromeda. I remembered your expertise from our previous encounter. A loud crack from outside interrupted them, followed by another and another. Storm moved quickly to the window. "We have company," she reported tensely. At least 6 figures in robes, surrounding the cottage. "How did they find us?" Jean asked, alarmed. Andromeda's expression was grim. "The diagnostic spell. It would have momentarily flared Harry's magical signature, despite your dampening device." "I should have realized, it's not your fault," Xavier said firmly. "We needed that information." He turned to Harry, who looked frightened. "Harry, I promised you wouldn't have to go back, and I meant it. Do you trust us?" Harry swallowed hard, then nodded. "Good." Xavier looked to his team. "Storm, create a distraction. Jean, prepare the van. Andromeda, if you're committed to helping Harry, now would be the time to demonstrate it." Andromeda stood, drawing herself up with the regal bearing of her aristocratic upbringing. "I've opposed Albus Dumbledore's methods silently for years. It's time that changed." She pointed her wand at Harry and cast another spell, this one enveloping him briefly in a shimmering blue light. "A temporary magical signature mask. Combined with your technology, it should buy us some time." Outside, Storm's eyes had gone white as she called upon her powers. The clear night sky transformed in seconds, dark clouds boiling up from nowhere, wind howling around the cottage, and then a torrential downpour that reduced visibility to mere feet. "Go," she commanded. "I'll cover your retreat." Xavier led the way as Jean telekinetically moved his wheelchair toward the back door, Harry staying close beside him. Andromeda followed, her wand at the ready. As they reached the van parked behind the cottage, shouts and flashes of colored light cut through Storm's manufactured tempest. Jean lifted Xavier into the passenger seat while Harry scrambled into the back with Andromeda. "What about Ms. Monroe?" Harry asked worriedly. As if in answer, a lightning bolt struck near the front of the cottage, followed by Storm herself, riding the wind currents to land gracefully beside the van. "Their shields are impressive," she reported, climbing in. "But they won't penetrate this storm for at least a few minutes." Jean started the engine, her telepathy extending outward to map the safest escape route. "Where to?" "The airfield," Xavier decided. "We need to get Harry back to the mansion where we can properly help him." As they sped away through the storm, Harry looked back at the cottage where magical lights still flashed. "Will they keep chasing us?" "Probably," Andromeda admitted. "But they'll be expecting us to use magical transport, apparition or port keys. They won't anticipate a Muggle private jet." "Is that how we're leaving?" Harry asked, a hint of excitement breaking through his fear. Xavier smiled. "Indeed. One advantage of being a wealthy educator is having access to convenient transportation." Harry's expression suddenly became serious. "Those people back there, they work for Dumbledore." "Some likely do," Andromeda confirmed. "Others would be Ministry Aurors, magical law enforcement. They believe they're retrieving a missing child, Harry. They don't know about the manipulations." "Will you tell them?" Harry asked. "When this is over?" Andromeda's expression softened. "Yes, Harry. The wizarding world needs to know what's been done to you. But first, we need to free you from these spells so you can decide your own future." Harry nodded, a determination beyond his years settling over his features. "I want to remember my parents. The real ones, not what I was told. And I want to know why this Voldemort person killed them. And why I didn't die too." "All good questions," Xavier said approvingly. "And together, we'll find the answers. But most importantly, Harry, we'll ensure that your mind is your own, and your choices are truly yours to make." As the van sped through the night, Harry Potter looked out at the rain-swept countryside of the nation he'd never really been allowed to know. For the first time in his young life, despite the danger and uncertainty, he felt something new unfolding within him, a genuine sense of hope. 3,000 miles away, in a castle hidden from the mundane world by powerful enchantments, an elderly wizard with a long silver beard sat up suddenly in his office, magical instruments on his desk whirring and emitting puffs of smoke. Albus Dumbledore frowned at the devices, particularly at a small silver machine that had fallen silent after years of steady operation. The blood wards at Privet Drive had collapsed completely, which could only mean one thing: Harry Potter no longer considered that place home. But more concerning were the fluctuations in the instruments tied to the various guidance spells he had carefully crafted around the boy's developing mind. Someone was interfering with his work, someone with considerable psychic power. Most troubling, Dumbledore murmured, rising to his feet. Most troubling indeed. He crossed to the fireplace, threw in a handful of glittering powder, and spoke clearly into the green flames. Minerva, assemble the order. Harry Potter is missing. Chapter 2, Unraveling the Blackbird jet cut through the night sky at supersonic speed, its advanced stealth technology rendering it invisible to both conventional and, thanks to Andromeda's spellwork, magical detection methods. Inside, Harry Potter sat with his face pressed against the window, watching clouds zip by in the moonlight. "This is way better than a broom," he whispered, fogging the glass with his breath. Xavier smiled from his position nearby. "You've flown on a broom before, Harry?" "No, but I've dreamed about it." Harry frowned. "At least, I think they were dreams. They felt really real." Andromeda, who had been conferring quietly with Jean at the back of the cabin, approached them. "That's likely your suppressed memories trying to surface. One of the spells I identified was specifically designed to block early childhood memories, particularly those involving your parents and their use of magic." Harry turned from the window, his green eyes serious behind his taped glasses. "Can you remove that one first? I want to remember them." The adults exchanged glances. "Memory manipulation is particularly delicate, Harry," Xavier explained gently. "We should start with something simpler, perhaps one of the ability suppressions. Then work our way toward the more complex entanglements. It's like untangling a knot," Jean added, joining them. "You start with the loose ends, not the center." Harry considered this, then nodded reluctantly. "Okay, but promise we'll get to the memories soon." "As soon as it's safe," Xavier assured him. Storm's voice came over the intercom from the cockpit. "We're approaching the coordinates. ETA 5 minutes. Andromeda looked out at the dark landscape below. "Where exactly are we going?" "This isn't the direction of your school in America. A temporary safe house," Xavier explained. "One of several the X-Men maintain throughout Europe for emergencies. This particular location has certain enhancements that will help us work without detection." The jet began its descent toward what appeared to be nothing but empty moorland in the Scottish Highlands. As they approached, however, a shimmer revealed a small stone cottage nestled against a hillside, surrounded by ancient standing stones. "Those are boundary markers," Andromeda observed with interest. "Very old magic. Celtic, perhaps." "Precisely," Xavier confirmed. "This location sits at the intersection of several ley lines. Moira MacTaggart helped us acquire it years ago. The standing stones predate modern wizarding settlements in Britain and operate on different magical principles, ones your ministry doesn't monitor." The Blackbird landed silently in a clearing beside the cottage. As they disembarked, Harry shivered in the cold Highland air, his oversized clothes providing little protection against the chill. "First order of business," Jean declared, placing a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder, "is getting you some proper clothes that actually fit." Harry looked up at her in surprise. "Really? My own clothes?" "Of course," Storm said as she joined them, securing the jet behind her. "We packed essentials before leaving the States. Including children's clothing in various sizes." "You were planning to find a kid?" Harry asked. Xavier smiled. "We often encounter young mutants in need of immediate assistance. Experience has taught us to be prepared." Inside, the cottage was surprisingly spacious and warm, with modern furnishings contrasting with the ancient stone walls. A fire crackled in the hearth, seemingly having lit itself upon their arrival. "Hank's environmental systems are functioning perfectly," Xavier noted with satisfaction. "The cottage recognizes our biometric signatures." Harry gazed around with wonder. "It's like magic, but different." "Technology and magic often accomplish similar goals through different means," Xavier explained. "One of many reasons I've always found the intersection fascinating." After Harry had changed into properly fitting clothes and eaten a late meal, the adults gathered in the cottage's main room to discuss their next steps. Harry, despite protesting that he wasn't tired, had fallen asleep on a comfortable sofa near the fire. "I've conducted a more thorough analysis of the spell matrix," Andromeda reported, her wand tracing intricate patterns in the air above a parchment where glowing symbols appeared. "The 33 manipulations fall into 4 main categories, as Charles initially sensed. What's remarkable is how they're designed to evolve as Harry ages." "Meaning?" Storm asked. "Some are already active, the self-worth suppression, memory blocks, accidental magic controls. Others are dormant, programmed to activate when he turns 11, or when he first enters Hogwarts, or when he encounters specific individuals." Andromeda's expression darkened. "It's essentially a developmental roadmap forcing Harry along a predetermined path." Jean studied the magical diagrams with concern. "And the end of this path?" Andromeda hesitated. "That's unclear. But one of the most deeply embedded compulsions involves willingness for self-sacrifice. Combined with what I know of the prophecy concerning Harry and Voldemort. Dumbledore is preparing him to die," Xavier finished grimly. "Conditioning a child from infancy to willingly sacrifice himself when the time comes." Silence fell over the room as the full implications sank in. "That can't happen," Storm stated firmly, thunder rumbling faintly outside despite the clear night sky. "It won't," Xavier assured her. "Now, which manipulation should we target first?" Andromeda pointed to a symbol glowing a dull orange. "This one, the magical core dampening spell. It's relatively simple in structure but powerful in effect. It's artificially limiting Harry's natural magical abilities to roughly 30% of their potential." "Why would Dumbledore want to suppress Harry's magic?" Jean wondered. "Wouldn't he want him to be as powerful as possible against this Voldemort?" "Unless he fears Harry becoming too powerful to control," Xavier suggested. "Or perhaps noticing the other manipulations as his magical awareness developed." "Both likely factors," Andromeda agreed. "Either way, removing this one first makes sense. It's minimally connected to the others and should give Harry immediate positive results he can feel." They decided to wait until morning when Harry was rested before attempting the first removal. As the others retired to their rooms, Xavier remained by the fire, watching the sleeping child. So much power and potential, so thoroughly constrained and redirected. So many choices already made for him before he'd had a chance to make any for himself. "We'll fix this, Harry," he promised quietly. "You'll have the chance to be yourself, whoever that turns out to be." "Am I supposed to feel different?" Harry asked the next morning, sitting cross-legged on a circular rug in the cottage's main room. Andromeda smiled, tucking her wand away. "The changes may be subtle at first. The dampening spell has been in place since you were a baby, your magic has never had a chance to flow naturally." Xavier wheeled himself closer. "Try to focus on how your body feels, Harry. Any new sensations?" Harry closed his eyes, concentrating. "I feel, kind of tingly. Like pins and needles, but not uncomfortable. Especially in my chest and hands." "That's your magical core adjusting to its new freedom," Andromeda explained. "It's like a muscle that's been constrained suddenly being allowed to stretch." "What can I do with it?" Harry asked eagerly. "With training, many things," Andromeda said. "But even untrained, you might notice accidental magic becoming more frequent or powerful in emotional moments." As if on cue, the teacup on the table beside Harry began to float gently into the air. I'm doing that?" Harry asked, eyes wide with wonder. "You are," Jean confirmed with a smile. Though likely unconsciously. The cup spun slowly in the air for a moment before settling back onto its saucer without spilling a drop. "Impressive control for untrained magic," Andromeda noted. "Even with just one constraint removed, your natural talent is evident." A slow smile spread across Harry's face, the most genuinely joyful expression they'd seen from him yet. Over the next several hours, they observed as Harry's newly liberated magic manifested in small, harmless ways, books opening to specific pages when he wondered what was inside them, lights brightening or dimming in response to his mood, small objects occasionally moving when he focused on them. "It's responding to his intentions," Jean observed. "Even without a wand or formal incantations. Wandless magic is extremely rare and typically requires years of study," Andromeda said, watching Harry with growing amazement. "Even simple levitation without a wand is beyond most adult wizards." "Perhaps that's by design," Xavier suggested. "The reliance on wands and specific incantations creates dependency and standardization, which allows for easier regulation." "You sound like my cousin Sirius," Andromeda said with a hint of amusement. "He always questioned wizarding traditions." Her expression suddenly changed. "Sirius. I should have thought of this sooner." "What about him?" Xavier asked. "He's Harry's godfather," Andromeda explained. "He was James Potter's best friend. But he's in Azkaban, our prison, for betraying the Potters to Voldemort and killing 13 people with a single curse." Harry, who had been practicing making a feather float across the room, turned sharply at this. "My parents' friend betrayed them?" Andromeda frowned. "That's the official story, but Sirius was like a brother to James. And he adored you, Harry. I never truly believed he could have done those things." "This seems like important information," Storm noted. "Why didn't you mention it earlier?" "Because I've avoided thinking about it for years," Andromeda admitted. "The idea that my favorite cousin could do something so monstrous. But now, seeing these manipulations, I wonder, what if Sirius's imprisonment somehow served Dumbledore's plans for Harry?" Xavier's expression became thoughtful. "What would have happened if Sirius hadn't been imprisoned?" "He would have raised Harry," Andromeda said simply. "As his godfather, he had both magical and legal rights to Harry's guardianship. Lily and James's will was explicit on this point." Harry stared at her. "I could have lived with someone who actually wanted me. Instead of the Dursleys." The raw hurt in the child's voice made everyone in the room wince. "I think," Xavier said carefully, "we need to investigate this Sirius Black situation more thoroughly. If an innocent man has been imprisoned to facilitate Dumbledore's plans for Harry, it wouldn't be the first injustice perpetrated in the name of the greater good," Andromeda finished bitterly. Jean, who had been monitoring their psychic perimeter, suddenly stiffened. "We have a visitor approaching." "Just one, but with a powerful magical signature." Andromeda moved to the window, peering out cautiously. Her posture relaxed slightly. "It's my daughter, Nymphadora. I sent her a coded message before we left London." Storm raised an eyebrow. "You told someone where we were going?" "Not specifically," Andromeda assured her. "It's a prearranged emergency contact system. She wouldn't know our location, just that I needed to meet her at a certain place. I can go to her and bring her here if you're comfortable with that." Xavier nodded after a brief hesitation. "If you trust her, we'll extend the same trust." Andromeda slipped outside, returning minutes later with a young woman sporting vivid pink hair and a heart-shaped face. She looked around the cottage with obvious curiosity before her eyes landed on Harry. "Watcher," she greeted with a friendly smile. "You must be Harry Potter." "I'm Tonks, just Tonks, mind you. Call me Nymphadora and we can't be friends." Harry couldn't help smiling back. "Nice to meet you, Tonks." Andromeda made quick introductions. "My daughter is in her final year of Auror training at the Ministry," she explained. She has access to information we might find useful. And you're not worried about her official obligations? Xavier asked directly. Tonks grinned, and suddenly her pink hair turned blue, then purple, then back to pink. I've never been great with authority, Professor. Besides, when Mum says Dumbledore's been messing with a kid's head, my obligations get real simple real fast. Harry stared at her changing hair. How did you do that? I'm a metamorphmagus, Tonks explained, scrunching up her face and transforming her nose into a duck's bill before returning it to normal. Born with it. Can change my appearance at will. A mutant ability within a magical population, Jean noted with interest. The genetic expression must interact differently with innate magic. Whatever you say, Tonks agreed cheerfully. Anyway, I brought what you asked for, Mom. She pulled a shrunken leather case from her pocket, tapped it with her wand to restore it to full size, and handed it to Andromeda. What's that? Harry asked. Pensive memories, Andromeda explained, opening the case to reveal several small vials of silvery fluid. Extracted copies of specific memories from various people. With these, we can view events exactly as they happened. Whose memories? Storm asked. Various Order members from the last war, Tonks said, suddenly more serious. People who knew your parents, Harry. And. She hesitated, glancing at her mother. And records from Sirius's arrest, Andromeda finished. Including, I hope, his interrogation. Tonks shifted uncomfortably. That's the thing, Mum. There wasn't one. Everyone stared at her. What do you mean, there wasn't one? Xavier asked sharply. I mean I checked the records thoroughly, Tonks said. Sirius Black was arrested at the scene, taken directly to Azkaban, and has been there ever since. No trial. No interrogation under Veritaserum. Not even a preliminary hearing. Barty Crouch Sr. signed the order as head of magical law enforcement, with Dumbledore's countersignature as Chief Warlock. Andromeda's face had gone pale. That's completely illegal. Even during wartime, every accused has the right to trial. Well, someone apparently skipped that bit in Cousin Sirius's case, Tonks said grimly. Harry looked from Andromeda to Tonks. So, my godfather might be innocent, but he's been in prison for 6 years without a trial? Can't someone just go talk to him? Azkaban isn't a normal prison, Harry, Andromeda explained gently. It's guarded by creatures called Dementors that feed on happiness. Most prisoners lose their minds within months. But if he's innocent, Harry began, distress evident in his voice. We'll add this to our list of wrongs to right, Xavier promised. But our primary focus must remain on freeing your mind from these manipulations. Andromeda nodded, turning back to the case of memory vials. These will help with that. Seeing your parents through the memories of those who knew them might help weaken the memory suppression spells. How do we view them? Jean asked. Andromeda removed a shallow stone basin covered in runes from the case. With this pensieve. It allows multiple viewers to experience a memory together. Harry approached the basin cautiously. Will I be able to talk to them? To my parents? No, Harry, Andromeda said gently. We'll only be observing past events, not interacting with them. But you'll see your parents as they really were, not through Dumbledore's filters or the Dursleys' lies. Harry nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. Okay. I'm ready. Andromeda selected a vial labeled Lily and James, Godric's Hollow, 1980, and poured its silvery contents into the basin. This is from Remus Lupin, another friend of your parents. It shows them at home with you as a baby, shortly after you were born. Everyone who wishes to view the memory, place a finger in the basin, she instructed. Xavier, Jean, Storm, and Harry joined her. Tonks remained behind, volunteering to keep watch. On 3, Andromeda said. 1, 2, 3, the cottage disappeared as they plunged into the memory. They found themselves standing in a cozy living room decorated for Christmas. A fire crackled in the hearth, and a tall Christmas tree twinkled with fairy lights, actual tiny fairies fluttering among the branches. Harry gasped as a young couple entered the room. The man was tall with unruly black hair exactly like Harry's, wearing glasses and a broad smile. The woman had flowing red hair and startlingly green eyes that matched Harry's exactly. In her arms was a tiny baby, just a few months old, with a tuft of black hair. That's me," Harry whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "And my parents. Look at him, Remus," Lily was saying to someone just behind them. They turned to see a tired-looking young man with prematurely graying hair watching the family with obvious affection. "He's trying to grab the fairies already. I think we have a future seeker on our hands." "Just like his dad," James said proudly, tickling baby Harry's stomach and making him giggle. Tears streamed down present-day Harry's face as he watched the scene unfold, his mother singing him a wizarding lullaby, his father making colored smoke rings emerge from his wand to baby Harry's delight, both parents looking at their son with such obvious love. Jean placed a comforting hand on Harry's shoulder as the memory continued, showing glimpses of his parents' personalities, Lily's quick wit and gentle strength, James's humor and fierce protectiveness. They watched as Sirius Black arrived, bringing an enormous stuffed dragon that changed colors when baby Harry touched it. "Only the best for my godson," Memory Sirius declared, scooping up baby Harry and spinning him around, making him shriek with laughter. "I'm going to teach you all the best mischief when you're older, Prongslet. Your dad and I know every secret passage in Hogwarts." "You will do no such thing," Lily protested, though she was smiling. "My son is going to be a well-behaved student." "He's a Potter, Lils," James laughed. "Mischief is in his blood." The memory shifted slightly, showing a different scene in the same house. Baby Harry was now crawling, chasing after a miniature toy broomstick that hovered just above the floor. "James!" Lily's voice called from another room. "Did you give him that broom? He nearly knocked over the cat." James grinned unrepentantly at Sirius and Remus. "Worth it. Kid's a natural flyer already." As the memory began to fade, Harry reached out as if trying to hold on to it. "No, please, just a little longer," but they were rising up, back into the cottage in Scotland. Harry stumbled slightly as they returned, tears still streaming down his face. "They really loved me," he whispered. "Yes, they did," Andromeda confirmed softly. "Very much." Xavier watched Harry carefully. "How do you feel, Harry?" Like something broke loose," Harry said, touching his temple. "I can remember bits of that now, not just from the memory we watched, but like it woke up my own memories. I remember the toy broom. And my dad's glasses. And my mom's voice when she sang." Andromeda cast a quick diagnostic spell. "The memory suppression is weakening. Not gone, but destabilized. Seeing direct evidence contradicting the spell's parameters has created cracks in its structure." "Can we see more?" Harry asked eagerly. "Not too many at once," Xavier cautioned. "Each memory is putting stress on the manipulation spells. Too much too quickly could cause a chaotic breakdown rather than a controlled removal." Harry reluctantly nodded his understanding. Instead, Jean suggested, "Perhaps we should address another of the simpler manipulations while the memory spell is destabilized." Andromeda consulted her notes. "The self-confidence suppression would be ideal, it's already been temporarily neutralized and is showing signs of degradation. The process of permanently removing the confidence suppression spell took several hours, with Xavier and Jean working in tandem with Andromeda. Xavier mapped the psychic architecture while Jean carefully contained the destabilized energy, allowing Andromeda to unravel the magical bindings with precise wand movements and whispered counterspells. Harry remained remarkably patient throughout, though occasionally wincing when particularly stubborn aspects of the spell resisted removal. "There," Andromeda finally said, lowering her wand. "It's gone completely." Harry took a deep breath, straightening his posture. The change was subtle but unmistakable. A 7-year-old shouldn't carry himself with such natural dignity, but Harry suddenly did. 2 down, he said with a small, determined smile. 31 to go. Over the next 3 days, they established a careful routine, alternating between viewing selected memories of Harry's parents and their friends, and removing the simplest of the manipulation spells. Each memory they viewed, James and Sirius as troublemaking students, Lily demonstrating her charm work, baby Harry's first birthday celebration, further weakened the memory suppression, allowing Harry's own early memories to gradually resurface. Each removed spell revealed more about Dumbledore's comprehensive plan for Harry's life. The Dursley Tolerance enchantment, once removed, left Harry openly questioning why he'd never reported his relatives' abuse to teachers or other adults. The Slytherin aversion spell's removal led to discussions about house prejudices at Hogwarts and how steering Harry specifically away from certain associations would limit his potential allies. "It's like he mapped out your entire life," Tonks observed on the 3rd evening as they reviewed their progress. "Friends, enemies, strengths, weaknesses, all predetermined. The question remains, to what end?" Xavier mused. What future event was all this preparation for? "The prophecy," Harry said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. "That's what you've all been tiptoeing around, isn't it? There's some prophecy about me and Voldemort." Andromeda nodded slowly. "Yes, but very few know its exact contents. Dumbledore was one of the witnesses when it was made." "I want to know what it says," Harry stated firmly. The newfound confidence from the removed manipulations was evident in his steady gaze. "If it's about me, I have a right to know." "You do," Xavier agreed. "But accessing that information may be difficult without alerting Dumbledore to our activities." Tonks cleared her throat. "Actually, about that. Dumbledore knows something's up. The whole ministry's in an uproar. The boy who lived missing, magical surges detected in various locations across Britain, they know someone's tampering with the spells on Harry. Dumbledore's called an emergency meeting of the Order of the Phoenix for tonight. His private organization from the war, Andromeda explained to the others. "How do you know this, Nymphadora?" Tonks ignored the use of her full name for once. "Mad-Eye Moody told me. He thinks I'm still considering his offer to mentor me after graduation." "Does he suspect your involvement?" Xavier asked. "Nah, he'd have hexed me 6 ways to Sunday already if he did," Tonks said confidently. "But here's the thing, they're planning to use a concentrated location spell. One powered by multiple Order members. If they do that, they'll find us," Andromeda concluded grimly. "Even with our current protections." Harry looked from one adult to another. "So we have to leave?" "Soon," Xavier agreed. "But first, there's one more critical manipulation we should address before relocating, the spell tracking Harry's magical signature. As long as that remains, they can potentially find him anywhere." Removing the tracking spell proved considerably more difficult than the previous manipulations. It was deeply integrated with several other spells, including the Horcrux containment, a term that made Andromeda visibly pale when she identified it. "What's a Horcrux?" Harry asked, noticing her reaction. "Dark magic," Andromeda answered tersely. "The foulest kind. It involves splitting one's soul through murder and binding the fragment to an object, or in this case, apparently." She couldn't finish the sentence. "There's something of Voldemort in me?" Harry asked, touching his scar. "That's what this is." Xavier moved closer to Harry. "It appears Dumbledore was aware of this and constructed containment spells around it rather than seeking to remove it. Can it be removed?" Harry asked, his voice remarkably steady despite the horrifying revelation. "Yes," Andromeda said firmly. "But it would require specialized ritual magic that we're not equipped for here. For now, the containment is actually beneficial, if ethically questionable in its implementation." After nearly 5 hours of painstaking work, they finally managed to disentangle the tracking spell from its connected manipulations and neutralize it. Harry immediately sensed the difference. "I feel lighter," he said, rolling his shoulders. "Like I've put down a heavy backpack I didn't know I was carrying." "That's an apt description," Xavier said with a smile. "The magical world has been essentially carrying you on a leash since you were an infant. Now, that leash is broken." Tonks, who had been keeping watch, suddenly burst into the room. "We've got company." Multiple apparition signatures about a mile out, approaching fast. "How many?" Storm demanded, already moving toward the window. "At least a dozen," Tonks reported. "And one feels like Dumbledore. His magical signature is pretty distinctive." "Pack only what's essential," Xavier instructed calmly. "We need to reach the Blackbird immediately." Harry hurried to gather the few possessions he'd accumulated over the past days: properly fitting clothes, a photo album Andromeda had created from the pensive memories, and a small stuffed black dog that resembled his godfather's animagus form, transfigured by Tonks. Within minutes, they were hurrying toward the concealed jet, Storm supporting Xavier over the rough terrain while Jean telekinetically carried his wheelchair. "They've breached the outer perimeter wards," Andromeda warned as they reached the clearing. 2 minutes at most before they reached the cottage. The Blackbird's ramp descended as they approached, its stealth systems already engaged. They had just reached the base of the ramp when multiple cracks of apparition sounded around the clearing. "Halt! Ministry of Magic," a deep voice commanded. They turned to find themselves surrounded by wizards in official-looking robes, wands raised. At their center stood a tall, imposing figure with long silver hair and beard, wearing midnight blue robes spangled with stars. His blue eyes, normally twinkling according to reputation, were grave and focused intently on Harry. "Harry, my boy," Albus Dumbledore said, his voice gentle but carrying absolute authority. "I'm relieved to find you safe. These people have taken you without permission or right. It's time to come home." Harry stepped forward, placing himself slightly ahead of the group. The contrast between the small 7-year-old boy and the powerful ancient wizard might have seemed comical if not for the unchildlike determination in Harry's eyes. "I'm not going back to the Dursleys," he stated clearly. "And I know what you did to my mind." A flicker of something, surprise, concern, perhaps even guilt, crossed Dumbledore's face before his expression settled back into grandfatherly concern. "I understand you must be confused, Harry. These people have filled your head with misconceptions. The protections I placed were for your safety and well-being. 33 spells to control my thoughts, feelings, and choices," Harry countered. "That's not protection. That's prison." Murmurs ran through the assembled Aurors. Several exchanged uncertain glances. Dumbledore sighed heavily. "You are too young to understand the complexities of your situation, Harry. The magical world faces dangers you cannot yet comprehend." Xavier moved his wheelchair forward to position himself beside Harry. "Perhaps you underestimate the comprehension capabilities of children, Headmaster Dumbledore. Particularly when they're finally allowed to think for themselves." Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Xavier, sharpening with recognition. "Charles Xavier. Your reputation precedes you. I was unaware the mutant community had taken an interest in wizarding affairs." "My interest is in the welfare of children," Xavier replied evenly. "Particularly those whose minds have been violated without consent." "A bold accusation," Dumbledore said, his voice hardening slightly. "And one made in ignorance of magical traditions and necessities." "I'm quite familiar with the argument that the end justifies the means," Xavier countered. "History has rarely vindicated those who employ it." The standoff continued, tension mounting as Storm subtly manipulated air currents around them, preparing for potential conflict. Jean maintained a light telepathic touch on the minds of the Aurors, monitoring for aggressive intent. Albus, one of the Aurors, finally spoke up, a grizzled man with a magical eye that swiveled independently of his normal one. "What's the boy talking about? What spells?" "Necessary protections, Alastair," Dumbledore replied smoothly. "Given Harry's unique importance. 33 separate mental manipulations go well beyond protection, Headmaster, Andromeda stated, stepping forward. As a qualified mind healer, I've documented each one. Including those designed to ensure Harry would willingly sacrifice himself when the time came. This caused even more murmuring among the Aurors. Andromeda Tonks, Dumbledore acknowledged with a slight nod. Your expertise in healing is well known, but you lack the full context of Harry's situation. I understand enough, she replied coldly. Including the fact that my cousin Sirius Black was imprisoned without trial, despite being Harry's rightful guardian. This revelation seemed to genuinely shock several of the Aurors, including the one called Alastor. Is that true, Albus? He demanded. Black never got a trial. Dumbledore's expression remained impassive. The evidence was overwhelming, Alastor. We were at war. Certain expediences were necessary. That's not how the law works, growled Alastor. Even for Death Eaters. Dumbledore raised his hand slightly, a gesture for patience. We can address these procedural concerns later. For now, Harry's safety is paramount. He must return to his relatives where the Blood Wards can protect him. Blood Wards that you anchored to abuse, Xavier said quietly. Conditioning a child to accept mistreatment, to believe he deserved it, all to ensure he would stay in a home that never wanted him. Harry's magic began to visibly manifest around him, a slight shimmer in the air, responding to his emotions. I'm not going back, he stated again, his young voice unwavering. And I'm not going to let you put those spells back in my head. I'm afraid you don't have a choice, my boy, Dumbledore said, raising his wand. This is for your own good. Stupefy. The red stunning spell shot toward Harry, but before it could reach him, Jean deflected it telekinetically. Chaos erupted. Storm's eyes went white as she called down lightning, striking the ground between the two groups. Several Aurors cast shields while others fired spells. Xavier pressed 2 fingers to his temple, sending a psychic pulse that momentarily disoriented several of the wizards. Get to the jet. Jean shouted, erecting a telekinetic barrier to block incoming spells. Harry stood frozen for a moment, watching the battle unfold around him. Then, something remarkable happened. As a spell broke through Jean's barrier and headed straight for Xavier, Harry's hand shot out instinctively. "No!" he shouted. The spell froze in mid-air, suspended in a shell of Harry's raw magic, before dissolving harmlessly. Everyone paused, staring at the display of wandless magic from a 7-year-old. Even Dumbledore seemed momentarily taken aback. "Impossible," one of the Aurors whispered. Taking advantage of the momentary lull, Storm intensified her weather manipulation, creating a dense fog that rapidly enveloped the clearing. "Move, now," she commanded. They backed toward the Blackbird's ramp, maintaining defensive positions. Dumbledore, however, seemed to have anticipated this. With a wave of his wand, the fog in his immediate vicinity cleared, and he strode forward with surprising speed for a man of his apparent age. "Harry, you must understand," he called, his voice carrying easily despite the chaos. "The fate of our world rests on your shoulders." "The prophecy, if there's a prophecy about me, I deserve to know what it says," Harry interrupted, still backing toward the jet. "But even if it says I have to fight Voldemort someday, that doesn't give you the right to control my whole life." Dumbledore's expression flickered with genuine surprise. "You truly have broken through the memory blocks. Remarkable." He sighed deeply. "Perhaps I did underestimate you." But Harry, the manipulations were not out of malice. Each was carefully designed to give you the best chance of survival against Voldemort. "By making me willing to die?" Harry challenged. "By preparing you for what might be necessary," Dumbledore corrected gently. "The prophecy states that neither can live while the other survives. Your connection to Voldemort runs deeper than you know." "The Horcrux," Harry said, touching his scar. "I know about that too." This time, Dumbledore's shock was unmistakable. He stopped advancing, staring at Harry with new assessment in his eyes. "You've learned much in a very short time. Knowledge you deliberately kept from him," Xavier noted. "Knowledge about his own life, his own mind, his own destiny." They had reached the base of the Blackbird's ramp now. The Aurors, having recovered from their initial confusion, were regrouping, though several still seemed disturbed by the revelations about Sirius and the mental manipulations. "I won't pretend my methods have been beyond reproach," Dumbledore conceded, surprising them all. "But my intentions have always been for the greater good. Harry must be prepared to face Voldemort when he returns, and he will return. The magical world's survival may depend on it." "Then help him prepare honestly," Xavier countered. "Without manipulation, without lies. If your cause is truly just, it shouldn't require deception." Dumbledore's eyes narrowed slightly. "You speak of matters you cannot fully comprehend, Professor Xavier. The magical world operates by different rules than the mundane one. But ethics and consent should be universal principles," Xavier replied steadily. For a long moment, Dumbledore seemed to consider this. Then he sighed heavily, suddenly looking every day of his considerable age. "Perhaps, there is some merit to your perspective," he admitted reluctantly. "But I cannot simply allow Harry to leave with you. His protection is my responsibility." "A responsibility you abdicated when you left me with people who hated me," Harry said quietly. "Who kept me in a cupboard and called me a freak." A shadow of genuine regret crossed Dumbledore's face. "The Dursleys' treatment was harsher than I anticipated. For that, I am truly sorry, Harry." "Sorry isn't enough," Harry replied. "I need to be free to make my own choices. To learn about magic and my parents without anyone controlling my thoughts." "And what of Voldemort? What of the prophecy?" Dumbledore pressed. "I'll face him if I have to," Harry said with surprising resolve for a 7-year-old. "But on my terms, not yours." Dumbledore studied Harry for a long moment, seeming to truly see the child for perhaps the first time, not as a pawn or a weapon or a sacrificial lamb, but as a person with his own will and determination. "You are indeed your parents' son," he finally said softly. "They too were never easily directed." He raised his wand again, but instead of casting a spell, he simply held it vertical in a formal gesture. "I propose a compromise. Allow me to place tracking charms, transparent ones that you can verify, to ensure your safety. In return, I will not force your return to the Dursleys, nor attempt to reinstate the manipulations we've discussed." Xavier exchanged glances with the others, a silent communication passing between them. "No tracking charms," Xavier countered. "But we will provide regular updates on Harry's well-being and education. And when the time comes for Harry to attend Hogwarts, if he chooses to do so, we will revisit these arrangements." "That's insufficient," Dumbledore replied, though without heat. "Harry's magical education cannot wait until he is 11. And there are matters of magical guardianship to consider." "Then appoint a neutral guardian," Andromeda suggested. "Someone not directly under your influence, but respected within wizarding society. I nominate Amelia Bones." This suggestion clearly caught Dumbledore by surprise. Amelia Bones, as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, was known for her fairness and independence. An interesting proposal, he acknowledged after a moment. "And Harry's magical education?" "I can arrange appropriate tutors," Andromeda offered. "Under Madame Bones's oversight." Dumbledore considered this for several long moments, his brilliant mind clearly weighing options and implications. "Very well," he finally said. "Conditional upon Madame Bones's acceptance and regular assessments of Harry's progress and safety. And..." He fixed Harry with a penetrating gaze, "a promise that when you are older, Harry, you will allow me to explain, fully and honestly, all that I know about Voldemort, the prophecy, and your connection to both." Harry glanced at Xavier, who gave him a slight nod of encouragement. "I agree," Harry said. "But no more secrets, no more manipulations. And I want to know about the prophecy now." Dumbledore hesitated, then nodded slowly. The prophecy states, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches. Born to those who have thrice defied him, born as the 7th month dies, and the Dark Lord will mark him as his equal, but he will have power the Dark Lord knows not, and either must die at the hand of the other, for neither can live while the other survives." Harry absorbed this, his young face solemn. "So one of us has to kill the other in the end." "That is one interpretation," Dumbledore acknowledged. "Though prophecies are notoriously subject to multiple readings. Which is why manipulating Harry's entire development toward a single interpretation was particularly egregious," Xavier noted pointedly. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly, accepting the rebuke. "I have lived long enough to know that admitting error is occasionally necessary, Professor Xavier. This may be such a time." He turned back to Harry. "I will contact Amelia Bones tonight. In the meantime, where do you intend to take Harry?" "Someplace safe," Xavier replied, deliberately vague. "We'll be in contact once the guardianship arrangements are formalized." Dumbledore nodded, then addressed Harry directly. "I hope you will come to understand, Harry, that despite my methods, I have always wanted what was best for you. Perhaps my definition of best was too narrowly focused on the prophecy and not enough on you as a child deserving of happiness." "Maybe someday I'll understand," Harry replied honestly. "But right now, I just want to be free to figure out who I really am." "A reasonable desire," Dumbledore conceded. He stepped back, gesturing for the Aurors to lower their wands. "Until we meet again, Harry Potter. May your path bring you the wisdom to face what lies ahead." With those cryptic words, Dumbledore disapparated with a soft pop, leaving the Aurors looking somewhat bewildered. After an awkward moment, they began disapparating as well, until only Alastor Moody remained. "I'll be checking into that business about Black," he growled. "If what you said is true about no trial." He shook his head, his magical eye spinning furiously. "Just watch yourselves. Dumbledore may have backed down for now, but he plays the long game. Always has." With that warning, he too disapparated. They wasted no time boarding the Blackbird, Jean quickly initiating launch procedures while Storm took the pilot's seat. "Did that seem too easy to anyone else?" Tonks asked as they strapped in. "Dumbledore giving in like that?" "He didn't give in," Xavier corrected. "He adapted. When he realized direct opposition wouldn't work, he shifted to a longer-term strategy." "So we still need to be careful," Harry said, understanding. Xavier nodded. "Very careful. But for now, we've won you space and time, the freedom to develop without his direct influence." As the Blackbird rose silently into the night sky, Harry looked out the window at the Scottish Highlands below. "Where are we going now?" "To my school in Westchester, New York," Xavier replied. "Where you'll meet other students with extraordinary abilities, though different from your own. It will be a safe place for you to continue recovering from the manipulations while learning to control your natural magic." "And we'll keep removing the rest of the spells?" Harry asked. "Absolutely," Xavier promised. "Andromeda has agreed to accompany us to assist with the magical aspects of the process." Harry smiled, the first truly relaxed expression they'd seen from him. "I can't wait to see what it's like. A real school where people don't think I'm a freak." Jean reached over to squeeze his hand. At Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, Harry, being different is exactly what brings everyone together. As the jet accelerated to supersonic speed, Harry Potter looked forward with genuine hope. For the first time in his young life, his future stretched before him as an open road rather than a predetermined path, full of possibilities that were truly his to choose. 2 weeks later, Harry Potter stood in the massive spherical chamber of Cerebro deep beneath Xavier's mansion. The room hummed with energy as Xavier carefully adjusted controls on the central console. "Are you sure this will work, Professor?" Harry asked, watching the helmet with curious apprehension. "Cerebro amplifies psychic abilities," Xavier explained. "Combined with Andromeda's magical expertise and the progress we've made so far, it should allow us to safely address the deeper manipulations that remain. Harry nodded, trying not to show his nervousness. In the 2 weeks since arriving at Xavier's school, they had removed 12 more of the 33 manipulations, leaving 19 still embedded in his mind. Each removal had brought small but significant changes, memories surfacing, emotional responses normalizing, magical abilities strengthening. The school had welcomed him warmly. Despite being years younger than most students, Harry had quickly formed connections, particularly with a girl named Kitty Pryde whose phasing abilities fascinated him, and a boy called Bobby Drake who could create ice. The novelty of meeting children with obvious mutations had helped Harry understand that his own differences weren't freakish at all, just another form of human variation. "Ready, Harry?" Andromeda asked, entering the chamber with Jean Grey. Both wore serious expressions that did little to calm Harry's nerves. "What exactly are we doing today?" he asked. Addressing the Horcrux containment, Xavier answered honestly. "It's one of the most complex aspects of the manipulation matrix, and potentially the most dangerous to leave in place long-term." Harry's hand moved automatically to his scar. "The piece of Voldemort." "Yes," Andromeda confirmed. "Dumbledore's containment is actually suppressing it effectively, but it's also integrated with several other manipulations that are harmful to you. We need to separate them, maintain the containment of the soul fragment while removing the additional controls." "And you think Cerebro will help with that?" Xavier nodded. "It will allow me to precisely map the psychic architecture while Jean maintains stabilization. Meanwhile, Andromeda will perform the magical aspects of the separation." Harry took a deep breath. "Okay. Let's do it." The procedure took hours. Harry sat in a specially prepared chair while Xavier, wearing the Cerebro helmet, directed Jean to specific points in Harry's mental landscape. Andromeda worked alongside them, her wand movements increasingly complex as she carefully separated magical threads that had been deliberately entangled. Toward the end, Harry began to experience flashes, disjointed images of a pale, snake-like face, high cold laughter, and a blinding green light. Just when it seemed unbearable, something shifted, and the pressure in his mind suddenly eased. "It's done," Xavier announced, removing the Cerebro helmet. "The Horcrux remains contained, but the manipulations using it as an anchor have been neutralized." Harry touched his scar, finding it noticeably less sensitive. "It feels quieter." "A good description," Jean said with a tired smile. "We've essentially isolated it, cutting off its ability to influence your thoughts or draw on your magic." "So what now?" Harry asked, climbing off the chair on slightly shaky legs. "Now," Xavier said with satisfaction, "we continue your education, both magical and mundane. Andromeda has arranged for tutors to visit weekly, and you'll join regular classes here for subjects like mathematics and science." Harry nodded, then asked the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "And what about my godfather? Has there been any news?" Andromeda's expression brightened. "Actually, yes. Amelia Bones has ordered a formal review of Sirius's case. With the evidence Tonks gathered and Moody's influence, they've scheduled a hearing. If all goes well, he could be released within months." Harry's face lit up with hope. "So I might get to meet him? For real, not just in memories?" "I believe so," Xavier confirmed with a warm smile. "And based on what we've seen in those memories, I think you'll find he's exactly the kind of guardian you deserve, someone who will encourage you to be yourself, not who others expect you to be." As they left Cerebro and headed back to the mansion's main levels, Harry's step had a new lightness to it. The journey of unraveling Dumbledore's manipulations was far from complete, but for the first time, his future felt truly his own, full of possibilities limited only by his own choices, not someone else's grand design. Chapter 3, Confrontation. "Again, Harry. Focus on your intent, not just the words." Harry gritted his teeth, pointing the practice wand Andromeda had given him at the feather lying on the desk. 6 months at Xavier's school had changed him. He stood taller, his frame less painfully thin, his green eyes bright with confidence behind new glasses that actually fit his face. Wingardium Leviosa. He called, making the prescribed swish and flick motion. The feather shot toward the ceiling like it had been fired from a cannon, then burst into a shower of colorful sparks. "Oops," Harry said, grinning sheepishly at his tutor. Professor Flitwick, the diminutive charms master from Hogwarts, clapped his hands delightedly. "Too much power, Mr. Potter. But excellent magical connection. Most first-years can barely make the feather wobble, let alone achieve levitation with such enthusiasm." Harry had been surprised when Flitwick had agreed to tutor him, especially since it meant traveling to America via international port key twice weekly. The arrangement had been part of the negotiated agreement with Dumbledore. Harry would receive proper magical education from approved instructors, with Madame Bones overseeing the arrangement as his magical guardian. "Try once more," Flitwick encouraged. "This time, imagine the feather floating gently, like a leaf on a breeze." Harry nodded, taking a deep breath. With each removed manipulation, his natural magic had become stronger and more responsive to his will. The challenge now wasn't accessing his power, but controlling it. "Wingardium Leviosa," he said, more softly this time, focusing on the gentle floating he wanted. The replacement feather rose smoothly into the air, hovering at eye level. Harry maintained the spell, making the feather dance in figure eights. "Excellent control," Flitwick squeaked excitedly. "Most impressive for a nearly 8-year-old wizard." "Thanks, Professor," Harry said, carefully setting the feather down. "Do you think I'm ready to try transfiguration yet?" "Patience, Mr. Potter," Flitwick cautioned with a smile. "Professor McGonagall will assess your readiness when she visits next week. One subject at a time." After Flitwick left via Portkey, Harry made his way through the mansion's corridors toward the library, where he'd promised to meet Jean. Students of various ages passed him, many calling out greetings. Despite being much younger than most residents, Harry had been fully embraced by the Xavier School community. "Hey, Harry!" Kitty Pryde called, literally running through a wall to catch up with him. At 13, she'd taken Harry under her wing like a little brother. "How'd your magic lesson go?" "I made the feather explode," Harry admitted with a grin. "Awesome!" Kitty laughed. "When do I get to see you turn someone into a frog?" "That's way advanced," Harry said, though privately he wondered if he could. With 27 of the 33 manipulations now removed, his magic responded so readily to his thoughts that sometimes things happened without conscious effort, lights brightening when he entered a room, objects moving slightly when he focused on them too intently. They reached the library, where Jean waited with a stack of books on magical theory. These study sessions had become a regular part of Harry's education, Jean helping him understand the theoretical aspects of magic from a scientific perspective, complementing his practical lessons with wizarding tutors. "Ready to dive into the principles of magical transference?" Jean asked with a smile. "Actually," Harry said hesitantly, "I was wondering if we could talk about something else first." Jean's expression turned serious. She didn't need to use telepathy to recognize Harry's nervous energy. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Kitty took the hint. "I'll catch you later, Harry. Bobby's waiting for me in the danger room anyway." Once she'd phased through the nearest wall, Harry sat across from Jean, fidgeting with the edge of his shirt. "It's about Sirius," he finally said. "His hearing is tomorrow, and—" "You're worried," Jean finished gently. Harry nodded. "What if they don't believe us? What if they send him back to Azkaban? Or what if he gets out but doesn't want to? You know. Doesn't want to be your guardian?" Jean asked directly. "Yeah," Harry admitted, staring at his hands. "I mean, all the memories I've seen show he cared about me when I was a baby, but that was years ago. Maybe he's changed his mind. Or maybe Azkaban changed him too much." Jean reached across the table to cover his hand with hers. "Harry, from everything Andromeda has told us about Sirius Black, his loyalty is absolute. 6 years in that terrible place wouldn't change how he feels about you." But what if it does? Harry pressed, voicing his deepest fear. What if I get my hopes up and then? Then you'll still have us, came Xavier's voice from the library doorway. He wheeled into the room, joining them at the table. Family isn't only defined by blood or legal guardianship, Harry. Whatever happens with Sirius, you have a home here. Harry swallowed hard against the sudden lump in his throat. I know. And I'm grateful, truly. It's just. You want someone who's truly yours, Xavier said, understanding perfectly. Someone who knew your parents, who can tell you stories about them that aren't just extracted memories. Someone who chose you. Harry nodded, unable to speak. That's a natural desire, Xavier assured him. And I believe Sirius will fulfill that role admirably. But even if complications arise, remember that chosen family can be just as meaningful as blood relations, sometimes more so. Harry managed a small smile. Like the X-Men. Precisely, Xavier confirmed. Now, regarding tomorrow's hearing, Andromeda, Storm, and I will attend as planned. The arrangement with Madame Bones gives us standing to present evidence, and the testimonial memories have been properly authenticated. I wish I could go, Harry said. The Wisengamot felt it would be too disruptive, Jean reminded him gently. The boy who lived appearing in the ministry after 6 months of absence would create exactly the kind of media circus they're trying to avoid. I know, Harry sighed. It's just hard waiting here while you're all there. Xavier's expression turned thoughtful. Perhaps there's a compromise. Jean, could you establish a telepathic link to relay the proceedings? Jean considered this. The distance would be challenging, but not impossible with Cerebro. I could essentially broadcast to Harry what we're experiencing. Harry perked up. Really? That would be brilliant. Then it's settled, Xavier decided. Now, shall we continue with your magical theory lesson? I believe you were exploring the similarities between psychic energy manipulation and certain forms of wandless magic. Hours later, Harry lay awake in his room, staring at the ceiling where he'd magically created a miniature replica of the night sky, complete with twinkling stars and slowly moving planets. Tomorrow could change everything. If Sirius was freed and mentally stable enough to become his guardian, Harry would gain a direct connection to his parents and the wizarding world through someone who genuinely cared for him. But if something went wrong? Harry rolled over, focusing on the techniques Xavier had taught him for quieting anxious thoughts. Whatever happened, he reminded himself, he wasn't alone anymore. He had people fighting for him now, people who saw him as Harry, not as the boy who lived or a weapon against Voldemort or a burden to be tolerated. For the first time in his life, he was valued simply for being himself. That knowledge finally allowed him to drift into sleep, the magical stars above him gradually fading as his consciousness slipped away. Harry! Harry, wake up! Harry blinked awake to find Jean sitting beside his bed, already dressed despite the early hour. Is it time? He asked groggily, reaching for his glasses. Yes. The hearing begins in 30 minutes. The others are already at the ministry. Harry scrambled out of bed, quickly changing into the clothes he'd laid out the night before. How long will it take? Hard to say, Jean admitted. Legal proceedings can be unpredictable, especially given the high-profile nature of this case. But Cerebro is ready whenever you are. 15 minutes later, Harry sat in a modified version of the chair used for his manipulation removals, watching as Jean donned the Cerebro helmet. This will feel strange at first, she warned. You'll be experiencing my sensory input while maintaining awareness of your own body. It might be disorienting. I'm ready, Harry assured her. Jean activated Cerebro, the spherical room lighting up with countless points of light representing minds across the globe. She focused on a specific cluster in London, refining her search until she located Xavier's distinct mental signature. Contact, she murmured. Establishing connection now. Harry gasped as his perception suddenly split. Part of him remained aware of sitting in the Cerebro chamber, but another part now saw through Jean's eyes as she telepathically connected with Xavier in London. The Ministry of Magic's courtroom came into focus, a large, circular space with tiered seating filled with wizards and witches in formal plum-colored robes. Xavier, Storm, and Andromeda sat in a designated area for witnesses. At the center of the room stood a heavy chair with chains on the armrests, currently empty. A formidable-looking witch with a monocle presided from the highest seat. "That's Madame Bones," Andromeda's voice explained, apparently responding to a question from Xavier that Harry hadn't heard. The doors to the courtroom swung open, and two wizards entered, escorting a gaunt figure between them. Harry felt his breath catch. Sirius Black barely resembled the handsome, laughing young man from the Pensive Memories. His face was skull-like, his once elegant hair matted and filthy, his prison robes hanging off an emaciated frame. But his eyes, Harry could see even at this distance that his eyes burned with the same intense life they'd held in the memories. Sirius was led to the chair, which surprisingly didn't bind him with its chains. Madame Bones spoke, her voice carrying clearly through Jean's telepathic relay. Hearing of the 23rd of October, 1988, into the matter of Sirius Orion Black, held without trial since November 1981 on charges of betrayal of James and Lily Potter to the Dark Lord, resulting in their deaths, and the murder of Peter Pettigrew along with 12 Muggle bystanders. The formalities continued, with various ministry officials identifying themselves for the record. Harry barely paid attention, his focus fixed on his godfather, who sat unnaturally still, as if conserving energy. Due to the irregular nature of this case, Madame Bones continued, specifically the lack of a proper trial at the time of arrest, we will begin with the administration of Veritaserum to establish basic facts, followed by examination of new evidence brought forth by Madame Andromeda Tonks and Professor Charles Xavier, acting on behalf of Harry James Potter. At the mention of Harry's name, Sirius's head snapped up, his sunken eyes suddenly alert. "Harry? Is he here? Is he safe?" His voice was hoarse from disuse. "Mr. Potter is not present," Madame Bones replied. "But he is safe and will be informed of these proceedings' outcome. Now, do you consent to Veritaserum questioning?" "I've been begging for it for 6 years," Sirius replied with a bitter laugh. "Yes, I bloody well consent." A ministry official approached with a small vial of clear liquid. 3 drops were administered to Sirius's tongue, and his expression immediately slackened, eyes going unfocused. "Please state your full name," Madame Bones began. "Sirius Orion Black. Were you the secret keeper for James and Lily Potter's Fidelius charm?" "No. I was originally chosen, but I suggested they switch to Peter Pettigrew at the last moment. I thought I was too obvious a choice." Murmurs broke out across the courtroom. "Did you betray James and Lily Potter's location to Lord Voldemort?" Many wizards flinched at the name, but Sirius remained expressionless under the serum's influence. "No. Peter Pettigrew betrayed them. He was a spy for Voldemort." "Did you kill Peter Pettigrew and 12 Muggles on November 1, 1981? "No. I confronted Peter, but he shouted that I had betrayed James and Lily. Then he cast a blasting curse, killed the Muggles, cut off his own finger, and transformed into his animagus form, a rat. He escaped down the sewer." The courtroom erupted in shocked exclamations. Madame Bones had to bang a gavel several times to restore order. "Pettigrew was an unregistered animagus," she demanded. "Yes. We all were, James, Peter, and I. We learned in school to accompany Remus Lupin during his werewolf transformations." More chaos ensued, with several older Wisengamot members looking particularly scandalized. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, establishing a comprehensive timeline of events leading to James and Lily's deaths. Throughout it all, Sirius's answers remained consistent. He had suggested the secret keeper switch, tracked down Pettigrew after finding James and Lily dead, and been framed for their betrayal and the subsequent explosion. When the Veritaserum wore off, Sirius slumped in the chair, exhausted but with a hint of desperate hope in his eyes. Next came the presentation of evidence. Xavier wheeled forward, introducing himself to the Wizengamot. While I am not a wizard, I possess certain abilities that have proven relevant to this case. Specifically, I am a telepath capable of detecting falsehoods and examining memories with great precision. Several witches and wizards looked skeptical, but Madame Bones nodded. Professor Xavier's credentials have been reviewed and accepted by this court. His testimony regarding Mr. Black's mental state and memory authenticity will be considered admissible evidence. Xavier proceeded to explain his findings from examining Sirius's memories during preparatory visits to Azkaban, heavily supervised sessions that had required special dispensation from the ministry. Mr. Black's memories are entirely consistent with his testimony. There is no evidence of deception or memory tampering. Furthermore, his primary motivation throughout the events in question was the protection of Harry Potter, his godson. Andromeda then presented the authenticated pensive memories they had collected, including one from Remus Lupin showing the four friends together in their animagus forms, proving Pettigrew's ability to transform into a rat. Most damning of all was a memory extracted from a ministry employee who had been present when Barty Crouch Sr. ordered Sirius sent directly to Azkaban. In the memory, Crouch explicitly stated, "Black doesn't need a trial. Everyone knows he was the Potter's secret keeper." By mid-afternoon, the momentum had shifted decisively in Sirius's favor. Even members of the Wizengamot who had initially appeared hostile were now exchanging troubled glances. Finally, Madame Bones called for closing statements. Sirius, now more alert despite his exhaustion, rose unsteadily to his feet. "I made a terrible mistake," he said, his voice stronger than before. "Not betrayal, never that, but convincing James and Lily to trust Peter instead of me. I've paid for that mistake with 6 years of my life. But the person who's paid most is my godson, Harry. He lost his parents, and because of my imprisonment, he lost his rightful guardian as well." His gaze swept the chamber. "I can't get those years back. But I can fulfill the promise I made to James and Lily, to take care of their son if anything happened to them. That's all I ask, the chance to be the godfather Harry deserves." After Sirius sat down, Madame Bones conferred briefly with several senior Wizengamot members. The courtroom fell silent in anticipation. In light of the evidence presented, Madame Bones finally announced, "This court finds that Sirius Orion Black was wrongfully imprisoned without trial. All charges against him are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, the Ministry of Magic acknowledges this miscarriage of justice and will provide appropriate compensation for the years of wrongful imprisonment." Sirius sagged in his seat, covering his face with trembling hands. Additionally, Madame Bones continued, "As Mr. Black was named godfather by James and Lily Potter and designated Harry Potter's guardian in their will, this court recognizes his legal right to assume that role, pending a 30-day supervised adjustment period to ensure his full recovery from Azkaban's effects." The ruling was followed by an eruption of activity, journalists rushing from the courtroom, ministry officials conferring urgently, and members of the Wizengamot debating among themselves. Through it all, Sirius remained seated, seemingly overwhelmed by the sudden restoration of his freedom and rights. Xavier approached him, extending a hand. "Mr. Black. We haven't been properly introduced. I'm Charles Xavier, and I've been helping care for your godson these past 6 months." Sirius grasped Xavier's hand with surprising strength. "Harry, is he really all right? Where has he been?" "Madame Bones told me he wasn't with his aunt and uncle anymore, but nothing else." "He's safe at my school in America," Xavier assured him. "And very eager to meet you. In fact." He glanced at Storm, who nodded slightly, confirming Jean's continued telepathic connection. "He's listening to us right now, through a telepathic link with my colleague." Sirius's eyes widened. "Harry? You can hear me?" He looked around uncertainly, not sure where to direct his words. Back in Cerebro, Harry leaned forward eagerly. "I can hear you," he exclaimed, forgetting momentarily that the connection only went one way. Xavier smiled. "He can hear you, but can't respond directly through this connection. However, he wants you to know how happy he is about the verdict." Sirius swallowed hard. When can I see him? As soon as the ministry's adjustment period begins, Andromeda answered, joining them. Hello, cousin. You look terrible. A ghost of Sirius's old grin flashed across his gaunt face. Always the charmer, Andromeda. I've missed your brutal honesty. You'll be staying with Ted and me initially, she informed him. Healer's orders. You need proper care before you're fit for guardianship. And Harry? Sirius asked anxiously. We'll visit as soon as you're settled, Xavier promised. In the meantime, we'll arrange for regular communication. As Jean gently withdrew from the telepathic connection, Harry found himself back fully in the Cerebro chamber, tears streaming down his face. He's free, he whispered. He's really free. Jean removed the Cerebro helmet, smiling warmly at him. Yes, he is. And very eager to see you. Harry wiped his eyes, a mixture of emotions washing through him, relief, excitement, anxiety, hope. What happens now? Now, Jean said, helping him from the chair, we prepare for the next phase. The others will return tomorrow with more details, but essentially, Sirius will spend time recovering at the Tonks home while continuing to communicate with you. Once the ministry's adjustment period is complete, you'll have decisions to make about your living arrangements. Harry nodded, his mind racing with possibilities. I want to meet him as soon as possible. And you will, Jean assured him. For now, how about we celebrate this victory? I believe the kitchen staff prepared a special dinner in anticipation of good news. As they left Cerebro, Harry felt lighter than he had in months, despite the remaining uncertainties. His godfather was free, had explicitly stated his desire to fulfill his role as Harry's guardian, and soon they would finally meet face to face. For a boy who had spent most of his life believing no one wanted him, it was almost too much to process. The remaining days of October passed in a blur of activity. Harry continued his magical lessons with Flitwick and, as promised, began introductory transfiguration with Professor McGonagall, who proved to be a strict but fair instructor. Your father had a particular gift for transfiguration, she told Harry during their first session, her Scottish brogue softening slightly at the mention of James. Though he too struggled with controlling his power at first. Meanwhile, Xavier, Jean, and Andromeda worked on removing the final manipulations in Harry's mind. These were the most deeply embedded, including the Slytherin aversion spell, the decision influence charm, and various subtle compulsions designed to guide Harry's development at Hogwarts. It's remarkable how comprehensive Dumbledore's plan was, Xavier commented during one session. Every significant choice Harry might face at school was subtly predetermined, which subjects to favor, which professors to trust, even which students to befriend. All to prepare me for facing Voldemort, Harry noted, having grown used to these discussions of his mental programming. But why make me bad at potions specifically? That relates to Severus Snape, Andromeda explained. He teaches potions at Hogwarts and had a complicated history with your parents. The aversion was likely designed to prevent you from excelling in his class, thus reinforcing his existing prejudice against you. Because of my dad? Harry asked. What did my dad do to him? Andromeda and Xavier exchanged glances. It's complicated, Andromeda finally said. Your father and Snape were rivals at school. Sometimes that rivalry crossed lines it shouldn't have. Harry absorbed this, frowning. So my dad wasn't perfect. No one is, Harry, Xavier said gently. James Potter was by all accounts a good man who loved you dearly, but he was also a flawed human being who made mistakes, particularly in his younger years. This honest assessment, rather than upsetting Harry, seemed to comfort him. That makes him seem more real somehow. Not just some perfect hero I could never live up to. By early November, regular communication with Sirius had been established. They began with exchanged letters, then progressed to supervised fire calls where Harry could actually see and speak with his godfather. Sirius improved visibly with each conversation, gaining weight, getting proper haircuts, his eyes gradually losing their haunted quality. During their third fire call, Harry finally asked the question that had been weighing on him. When the ministry's adjustment period is over, what happens? I mean, where will I live? Sirius's expression grew serious. That's entirely up to you, Harry. I'd love nothing more than to have you live with me. I've already started looking at houses in both magical and muggle areas. But, he added quickly, I understand you found a good situation at Xavier's school. The last thing I want is to uproot you if you're happy there. Harry bit his lip, considering. Could there be a compromise? Maybe I could split time between both places. Sirius's face lit up. That's brilliant, actually. You could continue your education at Xavier's while spending holidays and parts of summer with me. And I could visit you there regularly. You wouldn't mind? Harry asked hesitantly. Not having me full-time. Harry, Sirius said gently, what matters is what's best for you. Your parents would want you to have stability, proper education, and happiness. If that means a hybrid arrangement between Xavier's school and time with me, then that's what we'll do. The relief on Harry's face was palpable. That sounds perfect. On November 23rd, exactly 1 month after Sirius's hearing, Harry stood nervously in the entrance hall of Xavier's mansion, waiting for his godfather's arrival. The ministry's adjustment period had officially ended the day before, and Sirius was now legally recognized as Harry's guardian. Stop fidgeting, Kitty advised, watching Harry straighten his shirt for the 10th time. He already loves you, you know. I know, Harry said, though his stomach continued to churn with anxiety. It's just different in person. The mansion's security system announced an approaching vehicle. Harry moved to the window, watching as a sleek black car pulled up the long driveway. When it stopped at the entrance, Sirius emerged, looking almost unrecognizable from the gaunt prisoner Harry had seen through Jean's telepathic link. Clean-shaven, with his black hair cut stylishly to shoulder length, wearing a well-tailored suit that blended magical and muggle fashion, Sirius Black looked every bit the aristocrat he'd been raised to be, albeit with a rebellious edge that no amount of proper grooming could suppress. Xavier wheeled forward as the door opened, extending a hand in greeting. Welcome to Xavier's school, Mr. Black. We're delighted to have you here in person at last. Thank you for having me, Sirius replied, shaking Xavier's hand firmly. And please, it's just Sirius. His eyes moved past Xavier, searching the entrance hall until they landed on Harry. For a moment, neither spoke. Harry suddenly felt frozen in place, all his rehearsed greetings forgotten as he finally stood face to face with his godfather. Sirius took a hesitant step forward. Harry, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You look so much like James. But you have, my mother's eyes, Harry finished with a small smile. Everyone says that. Because it's true, Sirius replied, moving closer still. Though you're a bit smaller than James was at your age. We'll have to fix that, proper meals, plenty of Quidditch. Harry couldn't wait any longer. He closed the remaining distance and threw his arms around Sirius's waist. I'm really glad you're here, he mumbled into Sirius's jacket. Sirius's arms came around him instantly, holding him with gentle strength. Me too, pup. More than you can possibly know. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. Sirius received a full tour of the mansion, met the various instructors and students, and observed several of Harry's lessons, both magical and mundane. His natural charm and genuine interest in the school quickly endeared him to the Xavier community. I can see why you like it here, he told Harry as they walked the grounds one crisp autumn afternoon. It's a bit like Hogwarts in some ways, a place where being different is normal. That's exactly it, Harry agreed enthusiastically. No one thinks I'm a freak for making things happen. Everyone here has gifts that make them special. Sirius nodded thoughtfully. James and Lily would approve. They never put much stock in the magical world's obsession with blood purity and tradition. They believed in seeing people for who they are, not what they are. Like you becoming friends with Remus even though he's a werewolf, Harry noted. Exactly like that, Sirius confirmed with a smile. Speaking of Remus, he's eager to see you. Perhaps during the Christmas holidays. I've purchased a house in the countryside with plenty of room for visitors. Harry's eyes lit up. I'd love that. As they approached the lake at the edge of the property, Sirius's expression grew more serious. There's something we need to discuss, Harry. About your future in the wizarding world. Harry tensed slightly. Is this about Voldemort? The prophecy? Partly, Sirius acknowledged. But also about Dumbledore. He's requested a meeting with us both. Harry stopped walking, staring at his godfather. What? Why? He says there are matters regarding your magical education and the prophecy that need to be addressed. Sirius's tone made it clear he wasn't entirely convinced. I've told him any meeting would happen on our terms, not his. Do we have to meet with him? Harry asked, anxiety evident in his voice. Sirius placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. No, we don't. But eventually, you'll need to return to Britain's magical community in some capacity. Dumbledore may have manipulated you horribly, but he's also one of the few wizards with deep knowledge about Voldemort and the prophecy connecting you two. Harry considered this, absently skipping a stone across the lake's surface with wandless magic. Professor Xavier says sometimes we have to engage with people we don't trust to get information we need. Wise man, you're Professor X, Sirius said with a slight smile. But we'll set strict conditions. The meeting would happen here, with Xavier present. No legilimency, no attempts to reinstate any mental manipulations. Harry nodded slowly. Okay. But not until after Christmas. I want us to have that first, just family time, without Dumbledore, or Voldemort or prophecies. Absolutely, Sirius agreed instantly. Family comes first, Harry. Always. Christmas at Sirius's new home exceeded all of Harry's expectations. The house itself was perfect, a sprawling country manor with enough space for privacy but a cozy atmosphere that made it immediately feel like home. Sirius had decorated it with a mixture of magical and muggle comforts, deliberately avoiding the dark, oppressive style of his childhood home. Remus Lupin arrived on Christmas Eve, bringing armfuls of books as gifts for Harry. Despite his shabby clothes and prematurely lined face, his warm amber eyes and gentle smile instantly put Harry at ease. You can't imagine how long I've waited to see you again, Harry, Remus said, his voice thick with emotion as they sat before the fire after dinner. I tried to check on you over the years, but Dumbledore insisted the blood wards required minimal magical contact. Another of his manipulations, Sirius growled, handing Remus a glass of fire whiskey. Keeping Harry isolated from anyone who truly cared about him or could tell him about his parents. Harry, curled up in an armchair with hot chocolate, felt a surge of gratitude for these two men who had loved him even when they couldn't reach him. I'm just glad we're together now, he said. All of us. Christmas Day brought presents, a magnificent feast prepared by the house elf Sirius had hired, a free elf named Pipsy who received proper wages and holidays, at Harry's insistence, and hours of stories about the Marauders' time at Hogwarts. Your father was the first person who didn't care about my furry little problem, Remus explained, using their old euphemism for his lycanthropy. When they discovered why I disappeared every full moon, instead of abandoning me, James, Sirius, and Peter spent 3 years becoming animagi just to keep me company during transformations. It was James's idea, Sirius added, though I perfected the execution, naturally. Harry laughed at Sirius's mock arrogance, then asked the question that had been on his mind. Could you show me your animagus form? Sirius grinned. Thought you'd never ask. He stood, and a moment later, a massive black dog stood in his place, tail wagging enthusiastically. Harry gasped in delight as Padfoot bounded over to him, resting a heavy head on his knee. Brilliant! Harry exclaimed, scratching behind the dog's ears. Do you think I could learn someday? Remus choked slightly on his drink. Perhaps when you're older, Harry. It's extremely advanced magic, not to mention illegal without proper registration. Padfoot transformed back into Sirius with a pop. Always the voice of reason, Mooney. But yes, when you're older, and with proper supervision, I'd be honored to teach you. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur of winter walks, magical games, and more stories about Harry's parents. On New Year's Eve, as they watched magical fireworks from Sirius's garden, Harry realized he'd never been happier in his entire life. "Canute for your thoughts?" Sirius asked, draping a warm cloak around Harry's shoulders as they watched the colorful explosions. "I was just thinking that this is what family feels like," Harry said softly. "I never knew before." Sirius's arm tightened around him. "This is only the beginning, Harry. I promise." All too soon, it was time to return to Xavier's school. The arranged compromise worked perfectly. Harry would continue his education at Xavier's, with regular weekend visits from Sirius, plus extended stays at Sirius's home during holidays. By late January, Harry had settled back into his routine at the mansion when Xavier called him to his office one evening. "Headmaster Dumbledore has requested that meeting," Xavier explained, watching Harry carefully for his reaction. "He proposes visiting next weekend." Harry took a deep breath, mentally reviewing the progress they'd made. All 33 manipulations had been removed, though some lingering effects would take longer to fully dissipate. He was now able to recognize and resist outside influence on his thoughts. "I'm ready," he decided. "As long as you and Sirius are both there." "Of course," Xavier assured him. "The meeting will happen entirely on our terms." Sirius arrived 2 days before Dumbledore, spending time helping Harry prepare mentally for the encounter. Remember, he advised during a walking meditation exercise Xavier had taught them, Dumbledore isn't all good or all bad. He genuinely believes he's working for the greater good, which makes him more dangerous than someone with obviously malicious intent. "Because he justifies anything he does?" Harry asked. "Exactly," Sirius confirmed. "He'll appeal to your sense of responsibility, your courage, your desire to protect others, all noble qualities that he'll try to use to guide you back to his predetermined path." The day of the meeting arrived with a fresh snowfall that blanketed the mansion grounds in pristine white. Harry stood at his bedroom window, watching as Andromeda escorted an elderly wizard in surprisingly subdued robes, for him, up the driveway. Even from a distance, Dumbledore's aura of power was palpable. Harry made his way to Xavier's office, where Sirius already waited, looking uncharacteristically formal in dark blue robes. Xavier sat behind his desk, calm and composed as always. "Are you ready, Harry?" Xavier asked gently. Harry nodded, taking the seat they'd prepared for him, positioned so he'd face Dumbledore directly rather than from a lower position that might subconsciously create a student-teacher dynamic. A soft knock announced their visitors. Jean, who had been standing by the window, opened the door to admit Andromeda and Dumbledore. Harry's first thought was that Dumbledore looked older than he remembered from their brief encounter in Scotland. The headmaster's eyes, while still bright blue, seemed wearier behind his half-moon spectacles. "Harry, my boy," Dumbledore said warmly, though he remained standing just inside the doorway. "You're looking very well." "Thank you for coming, headmaster," Harry replied politely but neutrally. "Please, have a seat." If Dumbledore was surprised by Harry's composure or the formal setup of the meeting, he didn't show it. He took the offered chair, nodding respectfully to Xavier and Sirius. "I must say, this is a most impressive institution, Professor Xavier," Dumbledore began. "I've long been fascinated by how mutant abilities compare to and differ from conventional magic." "Perhaps we can discuss comparative metaphysics another time," Xavier replied smoothly. "Today's meeting has a more specific purpose." "Of course," Dumbledore agreed, turning his attention back to Harry. "First, I must congratulate you, Harry, on your remarkable magical development. Professor Flitwick and Professor McGonagall speak highly of your progress." "Thank you," Harry said. "They're excellent teachers." "They are indeed," Dumbledore smiled. Which brings me to one of our topics for discussion, your future magical education. While your current arrangement has served well for basic instruction, more advanced magical training will eventually require a proper wizarding institution. You mean Hogwarts, Harry stated rather than asked. Ideally, yes, Dumbledore confirmed. It is where your parents learned, where you have been registered since birth, and where the most comprehensive magical education in Britain is available. Sirius leaned forward slightly. There are other options. Beaux Batons, Ilvermorny here in America, certainly, Dumbledore conceded. Though none with Hogwarts' particular advantages for Harry's situation. You mean proximity to you, Harry said directly, surprising the old wizard with his bluntness. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled slightly. I see the removal of my influences has left your perceptiveness intact. Yes, Harry, in part. But also proximity to Britain's magical community, where you will eventually need to take your place. Like it or not, you remain the boy who lived to them. That comes with certain responsibilities. Because of the prophecy, Harry said. Indeed. Dumbledore studied Harry carefully. I understand you've been told the prophecy's contents. What you may not fully appreciate is Voldemort's continued existence, albeit in a weakened, non-corporeal form. The Horcruxes, Harry stated, causing Dumbledore to actually flinch in surprise. That's how he survived, isn't it? He made Horcruxes, multiple ones, and that's why he didn't die when the killing curse rebounded. The silence that followed was profound. Dumbledore stared at Harry, then at Xavier, clearly reassessing the situation. How did you? Dumbledore began, then composed himself. Yes, Harry. Voldemort created Horcruxes, objects containing fragments of his soul. It is one of the darkest secrets of his survival, one I had planned to share with you when you were older. When I was sufficiently conditioned to accept a martyr's role. Harry asked, his tone more curious than accusatory. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I see we must speak with complete candor. Yes, Harry. My manipulations, while ethically questionable, were designed to prepare you for an almost impossible burden, the fact that you yourself contain a fragment of Voldemort's soul, and that its removal might require your death. Except it doesn't, Harry countered calmly. The Horcrux can be removed through ritual means without harming the host. Now Dumbledore looked genuinely stunned. That is, a theoretical possibility I had researched but found no viable method for implementing. Andromeda spoke for the first time. The Black Family Library contains references to Horcrux extraction rituals. Not created for benevolent purposes, certainly, but adaptable. Sirius has granted access to magical scholars who are developing a safe procedure. Without informing the chief warlock? Dumbledore asked, a hint of his authority returning. Without informing the man who conditioned my godson to walk willingly to his death, Sirius corrected sharply. Xavier raised a hand slightly, maintaining the meeting's focus. Headmaster, you came here ostensibly to discuss Harry's future education and the prophecy. Let's continue with those topics constructively. Dumbledore inclined his head, acknowledging the rebuke. Very well. Harry, regardless of how the Horcrux in your scar is addressed, the prophecy remains. You and Voldemort are bound by fate. I don't believe fate is immutable, Harry replied thoughtfully. Professor Xavier has taught me that our choices matter more than any predetermined path. A philosophically admirable position, Dumbledore conceded, but magical prophecies have power beyond philosophy. Voldemort believes in the prophecy, which alone makes it dangerous to ignore. I'm not suggesting ignoring it, Harry clarified. Just approaching it on my terms, not yours or Voldemort's. A slight smile curved Dumbledore's lips. You have grown remarkably in these months, Harry. Far beyond what I expected for a child your age. Children often exceed our expectations when not artificially constrained, Xavier observed. Dumbledore accepted this with a small nod. A fair criticism. So, Harry, what are your terms for addressing the prophecy and your eventual return to the wizarding world? Harry exchanged glances with Sirius and Xavier before answering. First, I'll continue my current educational arrangement until I'm 11. Then, I'll attend Hogwarts, but with modifications, regular visits home to Sirius and continued connection to Xavier's school. Dumbledore's eyebrows rose. That could be arranged, though the logistics. Second, Harry continued, complete transparency about Voldemort, the Horcruxes, and any other relevant information. No more secrets, for my own good. That may occasionally conflict with security concerns, Dumbledore noted. Third, Harry pressed on, I want your help locating and destroying the other Horcruxes before Voldemort regains a body. I shouldn't have to face him at full strength just because I wasn't told what to look for. This gave Dumbledore pause. You continue to surprise me, Harry. Yes, I can agree to this condition, with proper safety precautions. Finally, Harry said, his green eyes meeting Dumbledore's blue ones directly, I want your word, magically binding if necessary, that you will never again attempt to manipulate my mind, my choices, or my development, directly or indirectly. The room fell silent as Dumbledore considered this ultimatum. Harry held his gaze steadily, showing neither fear nor anger, just calm determination. You ask for a significant surrender of influence, Harry, Dumbledore finally said. Guidance is not always manipulation. True guidance respects autonomy, Xavier interjected. It offers wisdom without coercion, advice without compulsion. Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Xavier. And you believe yourself more qualified to guide Harry than I am, Professor? I believe Harry is increasingly qualified to guide himself, with support from adults who respect his agency, Xavier replied evenly. My goal has never been to replace your influence with my own, but to help Harry develop the critical thinking and self-awareness to chart his own course. Dumbledore studied Xavier thoughtfully, then looked back at Harry. Something in the boy's steady gaze seemed to reach him, and his expression softened. Perhaps I have been too accustomed to orchestrating events rather than allowing them to unfold naturally, he admitted. Very well, Harry. I accept your terms, including a magical vow of non-interference with your mental autonomy. Relief washed through Harry, though he maintained his composure. Thank you, Headmaster. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical matters of Harry's education, the current status of the remaining Horcruxes. Dumbledore admitted to suspicions about their identities but no confirmed locations yet, and a broader Wizarding World situation. As the meeting drew to a close, Dumbledore made a final observation. You know, Harry, your mother would be particularly proud of you today. She too had a remarkable ability to see through pretense and stand her ground on matters of principle. I've learned a lot about her these past months, Harry replied with a small smile. And my dad too. They weren't perfect, but they loved me enough to die protecting me. I think they'd want me to live fully, not just survive as a weapon against Voldemort. I believe you're right, Dumbledore acknowledged, rising to his feet. I look forward to seeing the man you'll become, Harry Potter, a man shaped by your own choices, not my designs. After Dumbledore and Andromeda departed, Harry exhaled deeply, tension draining from his shoulders. That went better than I expected. You were magnificent, Sirius said proudly, squeezing Harry's shoulder. Indeed, Xavier agreed. You maintained your position without antagonism, a difficult balance many adults never master. Do you think he'll keep his word? Harry asked. The magical vow will ensure it regarding mental manipulations, Sirius assured him. As for the rest. Dumbledore is many things, but when he gives his word directly, he typically keeps it. He'll still try to influence events, just more transparently now. Harry nodded thoughtfully. That's fair. I don't mind advice or even guidance. I just want it to be honest, with all the information available. A reasonable standard for any educational relationship, Xavier noted. Now, I believe this successful negotiation calls for a celebration. I've asked the kitchen to prepare a special dinner. As they made their way to the dining room, Harry felt a profound sense of accomplishment. For the first time, he had faced Dumbledore as an equal participant in decisions about his own life, not as a pawn to be positioned according to someone else's strategy. The path ahead still contained significant challenges, Horcruxes to destroy, eventually a Dark Lord to confront, a complex magical heritage to embrace. But now Harry would face those challenges with genuine support, complete information, and most importantly, the freedom to make his own choices. That night, as Harry lay in bed reflecting on the day's events, he created his magical star display on the ceiling again, something that had become a comforting ritual. As he watched the miniature constellations slowly wheel overhead, he thought about how far he'd come from the frightened boy in the cupboard under the stairs. Professor Xavier had found him, discovered Dumbledore's manipulations, and helped free his mind. Sirius had been released from wrongful imprisonment to become the godfather he was always meant to be. And Harry himself had grown from a passive recipient of others' decisions into someone capable of negotiating his own future. Whatever challenges lay ahead with Voldemort and the prophecy, Harry knew one thing with certainty: he would face them as himself, not as someone else's carefully constructed tool. His mind was his own, his choices were his own, and his future, while influenced by prophecy, was ultimately his to determine. With that comforting thought, Harry Potter closed his eyes, the magical stars above him twinkling peacefully until sleep claimed him, bringing dreams not of cupboards or green light, but of possibilities yet to come. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.